I think we're live. Hello, folks. How's it going? It's nice to see ya. My name is Dustin Cormier, and this is another episode of How to Rock Astrology. I'm just going to be getting my live chat happening here. Of course, we know this is a live situation, so everybody can feel free to say hello and drop us a comment. Ask any questions as we go along. Today we are going to be discussing, in particular, mostly, Surya, the sun, coming from Graha Sutras. This is a series I've decided to do. I deeply respect and love the work of Ernst Wilhelm. I get to have him on my channel once in a while. He's a blessed, beautiful guy. And he has created this book called Graha Sutras. Most of these sutras are stemming from what is given in Parashara, Parashara's ancient text. It's Brihat Parashara Horoshastra. Much of the Vedic wisdom about the planets and about the signs and about the houses comes from ancient figures like Parashara. It's said that these people were clairvoyants at the time. They could see the inner cosmos within themselves, and they explained it, and they would point to outside to confirm what they felt within, as opposed to us these days who look outside, who look inside to confirm what they see in the stars. So that's how they did it back in the day. Hello, Susie. Sunday blessings. It's nice to see you. So today I thought that I would come on my channel and discuss, I'm going to talk a little bit about my own little intro, just discussing a little bit about the numerology of the sun, and then we're going to get into Ernst's Graha Sutras. I'm very excited to get into the Graha Sutras. I think it's a book everybody should buy and get for themselves, because there's so much more to astrology than just the sign that a planet is in. There's a whole backdrop of things that you only really know about once you start to dive into the exoteric nature of that planet. And you're not always going to find it in cookbooks where you just read the sun in this sign, the sun in this sign, the sun in aspect to Saturn, the sun in aspect to this. Today we're going to be learning about the full guts of the sun. Now, before we start today, I'd like to take just a moment to do a little sun Beej mantra. This is the mantra for Surya. Surya being the Vedic name of the sun. For anybody who's interested, whenever you have any problems with the sun, as I do in my chart, my sun doesn't have the strongest Shadbala in the world. Hello, Miyamor. Nice to see you. Shadbala is one of it's considered to be 7 ways of categorizing the strength of a planet in a chart. This goes beyond signs. This has to do with the astronomical figures of a planet. And my sun is not as strong as it could be compared to my other planets. And this is why I often use this Surya Beej mantra. So maybe I'll see if I can get it going on the screen here. This is what it looks like here. Om Hram Hrim Hram Sa Suryaya Namaha Om. That's how the mantra goes. I'm going to do it 2 more times. Feel free to join me, and then we'll get back into getting into some knowledge. Om Hram Hrim Hram Sa Suryaya Namaha Om. Om Hram Hrim Hram Sa Suryaya Namaha Om. Blessings to Ganesha, blessings to the sun, blessings to Surya today in particular. It is Sunday today. It's nice to be able to do this Surya podcast on a Sunday, because as we're going to learn, Sunday is the day of the sun, in case you didn't know. There's a numerology to the weekdays that Ernst Wilhelm is big about, and you're going to see me talking about it whenever you listen to my rising sign podcasts. We go through all the planets, what all the planets mean to each rising sign, and we go through them in this numerology. Sunday, sun. Monday, moon. Mardi, Tuesday, Mars. Mercredi, Wednesday, Mercury. Thursday is Jupiter. Friday is Venus, the 6th, and then Saturn is 7, Saturn day. So, I can see my friend Susie is getting into the spirit with some nice Gayatri mantra. Nuez Project, nice to see ya. Pleasure having all you folks hanging out with me while I go through this stuff. Now, let's start looking a little bit into what this figure of the sun is all about in astrology. I often like to say that Western astrology and many types of astrology, really in modern fad astrology, it's often the sun is often focused on. It's because the sun really is deeply important. It really shows a huge part of the character of a person. But the sun is just one of 7 ancient grahas and only one of 9 modern grahas or planets. It's debatable whether Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto should be called grahas, but I digress. They are certainly planets. The sun is the number 1 graha. It is a huge aspect of ourselves. And you have to consider the nature of Leo, what's falling into Leo, the aspects to Leo as a sign, and what does this Leo rule, what house cusps fall in Leo, in order to truly know the nature of what the sun means in the context of your rising sign. It's always going to be important to each rising sign, no matter what your rising sign is. The house that Leo rules is going to show an aspect of your identity, of who you deeply are in your spirit. I always like to read this one little line from this book. It's Decoding the Zodiac by Pratyush Bhattacharya. Pratyush tells us that as the sun is the ultimate source of power in the solar system, the sign inhabited by the sun is also the primary source that powers our identity. While the moon creates the sense of individual identity, the sun determines how brightly that identity shines. Now, he mentions a sign in particular because this is a book that's all about the planets and the signs. But the point still stands. The moon reflects our personality, but the sun is the identity that is being reflected in that sort of way. Hello, Teresa. Good morning. So let's talk a little bit about the sun. First of all, this is our numerological key code. You'll be seeing me referring to this whenever we go through these Graha Sutras. It's sort of like a mystical key code for all things planetary in astrology. And each of these numbers resonates with the nature of the planet that we're talking about. So we can go, as we go along, you guys are going to see these. But for now, we're talking about 1. The number 1 relates to the sun. It relates to Sunday. It relates to yourself. We hear from Vyasa. I worship the sun, who has the luster of a red hibiscus flower, who has the power of perception, of great effulgence, the dispeller of darkness, who destroys all sins, the maker of the day. Vyasa is the classical ancient arbiter of Vedic authorship. It's a spirit that inhabits those who create the great works of the Vedas. Now, I'm giving all these sorts of things just as a little bit of background on the nature of astrology. I have this drape here, and it's a metaphor I've been kind of using for these intro videos. The drape is there. There's a box or some kind of object under the drape. What that object is the true nature of the self, the soul, and the planet that we're talking about. The drape is this numerology. It's the many ways, the esoteric ways of talking about each planet. So you got to understand that when you're trying to learn about astrology, there is a little bit of like memorization that you have to do. It's like you have to give yourself the impressions of the consciousness of the entity of the Graha. The Grahas are alive and well, and we are the living embodiment of them. We are the living embodiment of the divinity that is the planets that are mystically, magically a reality in our galaxy. I'm going to do a video soon that talks about how, most people think that we have aligned the chakras to fit the planets. It's like, why do we have 6 chakras? It's because we have the zodiac and we have the 6 or 7 luminaries connected to them. And then the sun and the moon. So we've got Saturn on the root, Jupiter on the 2nd chakra, Mars on the 3rd, Venus on the 4th, Mercury on the 5th, and then the sun and the moon on the 6th chakra, the throne of the soul. So a lot of people suggest that this is something that we've aligned with the galaxy. The galaxy has these planets, and so of course we're going to anthropomorphize, consider the planets to be this divine thing, because that's what we are. But as I'm going to be talking about in my videos, this is a divine archetypal blueprint. And it's a miracle, but it's no coincidence that humans have evolved on a planet that has the planetary schema that we do. And this is a divine language that we have to tune into by absorbing what's given by the ancients. Because when you see a lot of YouTubers talking about astrology and they talk about it with confidence, it's because they have absorbed and eaten the soul of the planets that they're talking about, if they have done that. The really high-end people who write about astrology, they have eaten and absorbed the consciousness of the planets. And that's what we're trying to do today. We're having a lesson in absorbing the background consciousness of each of these planets. In particular, we're talking about the sun today. So I'm still getting used to my language of discussing these things, but this is the reason why we're going through these subtle impressions of what the sun is known to be in astrology. Now let's go to Shukla Yajurveda. I know that great being who has the effulgence of the sun beyond darkness. Only knowing him can one go beyond death. There is no other path for the journey. Super psychedelic, because the self, the nature of the spirit, the nature of the reincarnating Atman is this sun. And wherever the sun is in your chart, it shows you a little bit about this. But you need to see everything else going on in the chart to know what is the stage of evolution. The sun is the nature, is the path. It's the nature of the path. But how far you've progressed on the path depends on all of the things in astrology. We'll talk about that more eventually. Just checking you guys can see me here. The sun has yellow eyes which dispense honey. His body is square. He is pure, bilious, that's pitta in constitution, intelligent, masculine, and tends towards baldness. And this is coming from Parashara. Usually when we see these very specific indications for a planet, it usually means that we're talking about someone who has an emphasis of Leo, who has the sun as their Atmakaraka, who has Leo rising, or who has the sun in abundance. So this is a little bit more of what's behind the drape of what we know as the sun. This is the guts of what the sun is all about. It's the principle of vitality. It's our sense of individuality. It's our creative energy, our radiant inner self and attunement to the soul. It shows our essential soul values that we cannot contradict. If you contradict the soul values of the soul and of the sun, you're going to run into trouble in your life. And of course, anybody who has difficult squares or difficult aspects from planets to the sun, you're going to find you have to be dragged through things in life that contradict your essential values, the essential things that you need in order for yourself to grow and to grow into your kingdom. With the sun, there's an urge to be and to create. It needs to be recognized and to express the self. It's a funny thing that if anybody knows Gabor Mate, Gabor Mate is a brilliant psychoanalyst and poet who is a big on the scene right now. And Gabor Mate talks about how there's two essential things that a child needs in order to survive. And these two things often contradict each other because of trauma in childhood. The first thing is to be attached to something, to be attached to social cohesion, to be attached to the mother, to be attached to the father and the family unit and the brothers and the sisters, and to adapt to them. It's the moon. Creating a reality that subsists. But even, I said that would be first, but really what should be first is the sun. The sun is self-authenticity. Oftentimes, many people get into trouble in their life because, whether it's because the moon is placed in a funny place in their chart or whether it's because the sun is placed in a funny place in their chart, they lack self-authenticity. And they try to use social cohesion in order to, as a coping mechanism. But if they lose their essential self, if they lose the essential nature of themselves, they're always going to suffer. It's going to be difficult to hold your personal boundaries, to say this is uncomfortable for me, to say I want to do this and to follow it through. This is all stuff related to the sun. It's the most essential inward part. And it's a malefic. It often is it causes difficulty. This is why in the Bhagavad Gita, we talk about the sun and the soul as being an arbiter of sacrifice, of dharma. Dharma really means sacrifice in a lot of ways. It's as if we kind of have to go and sacrifice. We have to endure the intense heat of manifestation through wherever the sun is, by sign, house, and by aspect. And a lot of the times, life will not be fair. A lot of times we can't keep our self-authenticity because of something going on in reality. And this is the kind of things that we'll experience if we have difficulties with the sun. Oftentimes, as a coping mechanism, we will hold on to our mother. We will hold on to a lover. Venus is considered an enemy to the sun. It often happens that through our need for love or our desire for the rather luxurious, superficial aspects of love, which Venus can convey sometimes, the nature of trying to be well received by our lover causes us to neglect our own personal boundaries. And we can do that up to a certain point. But if Venus eats the sun, then you're essentially really going to be eating what you could be best doing in your relationship and for yourself, in your personal kingdom. Because as I always say, when it comes to relationships, most people think that when you come in relationship, it's two halves making a whole. But what it really should be is two completely whole individuals coming together and making the infinity symbol. It's a cute little thing for folks to sort of jive on there. Because that individual wholeness is what's represented by the sun. And it's the most important thing. Being able to demand your space that you need to create the reality that you want. Because we all want that. If everybody abided by the wisdom of the sun in this way, if everybody had, the guidance from their father or some kind of father figure to do what the classical archetype of the father does, which is to do what is best for his own nature. As we grow old, we all eventually learn, we're going to talk about how the sun's age is 50. When you're about 52 to 62, that is the age where the sun is your Naisargika dasha. When everybody is about 52, they are doing the completion of what their whole life meant. And most men, especially if they have a well-placed sun, they will say, forget everything. I've gone and I've been married. I've had kids. Now it's time for me to do what my life is for. And they demand space. It's like, what else am I going to do with my life but what I have the talent for? And of course, this is the same thing for women and everything in between. Everybody has to manifest what they want for themselves. It's a tricky thing because the sun can get into egotism, but that's only if the sun does not consider the whole zodiac. After all, what is your own needs without adapting to the resources of the love and the people around you through the heart and through the moon? We have to consider all the planets in astrology, but it's just funny how it often goes one way or the other. Some people think, since we have to do all the planets, since Venus is just as important as the sun, since Saturn is just as important as the sun, I can go without being authentic because I got a strong Venus. I got a good wife. I got good resources and luxuries. I got a good Jupiter. I'm super wise. I've got this intelligence, and that's okay. I got a weak sun, but that's okay. Even if you have a weak sun, I recommend that you check out the mantra that we read, the Surya mantra, and invoke it within yourself, because the sun is number one, and everybody has to abide by their authentic spiritual soul and self in order to take most advantage of all the planets in the zodiac. The sun is very important in astrology. So let's continue on here. The sun rules Leo. The sun is also the Karaka, the significator of the 1st, 9th, and 10th houses. And this is very important. I was supposed to make a slide showing the 1st, the 9th, and the 10th house. But essentially, when a planet is a Karaka of these houses, so you got to dig that the houses are considered to be different than the signs in Vedic astrology. The 9th house is not just like Sagittarius. The 1st house is not just like Aries. The 1st house resonates with the sun. The 1st house, the 9th house, and the 10th house are what the sun is the Karaka for. It's a significator for, which means it's a two-way thing. If you've got positive planets in your 1st house, like if you've got like a benefic, like Venus or the waxing moon or Jupiter in your 1st house, your sun could be debilitated and it could be conjunct Saturn, but it'll still have the strength coming through the 1st house because the sun is the 1st house, the 9th house, and the 10th house. Conversely, if you have difficult things happening in any of those houses by sign, remember in Vedic astrology, house cusps are like a planet in themselves. So let's say if we're talking about the 1st house, let's say Aries, just to make it easy for us. We know if you have, let's say, Saturn in Sagittarius, you do have a heavy planet there in the 9th house. If Saturn's well placed, that's not going to be a big deal. That could actually give greatness because any planet is happy in the 9th. But you have an influence that is gripping the 9th house. It's more really to say that if you have positive planets in the 9th, your sun will have an easier time doing what the sun does because the sun is the 1st house, the 9th house, and the 10th house. This is how things are conveyed in Vedic astrology. There's a spider webbing effect. And if you have a very weak sun, let's say you've got Saturn in the 9th house and your sun is debilitated, it's with Venus in the sign of Libra. That's a tough place for the sun because Venus is strong in Libra and the sun is weak in Libra. That means that Venus is going to eat the sun alive in that particular combination. Now that means for Saturn being in the 9th house, Saturn is going to have a little bit of difficulty. because the Saturn is trying to convey itself through the house that is connected to all the numerology of 9 and of the 9th house. And the sun is a part of that. So there's an interweaving here. I mean, you could see it archetypally. The 9th house has to do with our role in life. And Saturn, being in the 9th house, needs to have some kind of dedicated role in life that it sticks to from inside itself in order to do what Saturn needs to do in the chart. For an Aries, that would be the 10th house and the 11th house. So Capricorn and Aquarius rule the 10th house and the 11th house for Aries. Saturn is channeling those houses through Sagittarius, the 9th house, for an Aries rising. If you have a very weak sun, as we've just described, that Saturn is going to have a hard time doing its career things, 10th house, and its goals, 11th house, through the 9th house, because the 9th house isn't going to feel confident in sticking to some kind of fixed path in life that relates to the self. It's going to adapt to the world around it instead of demanding the space it needs to live its life and live its goal. And so now Saturn is suffering because the sun is suffering, because Saturn is in a house ruled by the sun. This is the kind of thick stuff. This is how, some deep guts of Vedic astrology theory. It's not necessarily our place to get into that here, but I'm just giving you guys a sense of what the karakas mean. So the sun is the karaka, the significator of the 1st house, the 9th house, and the 10th houses. Now we're looking at some key indicators of the planets, and this is coming from David Frawley's Astrology of the Seers. He's got some good stuff in this book. He is a sidereal astrologer, but he is still reading ancient Vedic texts that go beyond the whole tropical sidereal debate. And this is what he says. Each planet relates to various factors inwardly and outwardly. Their judgment depends upon how that planet is oriented in the chart. For example, the sun is the significator of the father. If the sun is strong, one's father will usually be strong, healthy, and successful. Naturally, each planet indicates many things. To be more specific, other factors like various houses and the rulers must be brought into consideration, but there are these general archetypes. And the sun as a general archetype indicates the father, the ego, the capacity for the ego to deal with growing through difficulties, the self, the soul, individuality, rational mind, honor, and status. And dealing with all these things, dealing with being rational, dealing with having dignity and having honor. Now, we're going to talk about the planetary symbols of the sun in our Leo Rising podcast. You can check that out. But this is a little snippet from that same thing. It's what the sun signifies. Essentially, what we're getting here is that there's basic symbols within each planetary glyph. The circle represents that which is boundless, eternal, infinite, without beginning, without end. It's often represented by the serpent chasing its own tail. And this is what the sun is made up of. It's that which is eternal inside the self. It is the pure Atma nature of the soul. My friend Irene Mack has just given me a tip. I deeply appreciate you, Irene. Thank you for the tippy for the hippie. The hippie appreciates it. It's very sweet of you. Now, Isabel Hickey also tells us, showing us the symbol of the sun as being the infinite, eternal soul, which is always needing to come through. Yes, Irene, that tip did work, and I appreciate you very dearly. So, in a personal chart, the sun signifies the basic drive for significance and your ability to abide by that need for that basic drive. It signifies a powerful sun. A powerful sun means a very great power to do and to be. It signifies the will. Signifies male relationships in a female chart, specifically the father. They say that women tend to abide very strongly by the sun in terms of their male relationships, and also Mars as well. It also especially relates to their father. The sun relates to vital energy coming from etheric levels. That's prana. It's pure pranic energy. It's the urge for power. It's constitutional strength. Rules the heart and spine in the physical body. Rules Leo, and it's the natural ruler of the 5th house. So, the sun has a lot of very important things, and when the sun is anywhere in the same sign as another planet, it will cause what's called separation, and we're going to talk about that as we go along. It's a separating influence that will kind of bleach whatever is with it, almost in the same way that you leave a t-shirt out in the sun, and it gets bleached. It's not exactly good for the t-shirt, and it's not exactly good for any planet that's around the sun. But some planets can do well in this regard. Some planets are conducive to this energy together. For example, Irene, you've mentioned that you've got the sun conjunct your Mars. A Vedic conjunction is usually when 2 planets are in the same sign. They're going through the same dispositor. So if Mars is 1 degree Capricorn and the sun is at 29 degrees Capricorn, they're still considered a conjunction in Vedic astrology. Of course, the closer they get, the more of a conjunction they are. And we have to consider that the sun will combust any planet that it gets within about 7 degrees of, 7 to 10. Most Vedic people say that there's different degrees of orb for the sun's combustion of different planets. Now, my friend Jesse Smith has asked, what book has the planetary karakas for each house? Where I get my information from is Asheville Vedic Astrology. I think I can get my book if I could just show you here. This is RYAN KURCZAK'S book. Let me just fandangle this. My teacher, RYAN KURCZAK, created this book with his teacher, Richard Fish. And this would be my manual, personally, for all of the specific little figures related to Vedic astrology. And he is himself a tropical Vedic astrologer, although he was working with a sidereal Vedic astrologer, Richard Fish, while he was making that book, but he was always open to being on the fence between the two. And that book has got all the goods of this particular stuff. So no problem, Jesse. I'm glad that I got to answer that for you. I should say, it's cool. We got a few people here with Sun conjunct Mars. That's funny because my Sun is right conjunct Mars in the sign of Scorpio, in 16 degrees Scorpio. So I really have a lot of that Sun conjunct Mars energy as well, and mine's about as combust as it could be. So it is what it is. That can be a difficult thing, but it ultimately is not always a terrible thing because the Sun and Mars are good friends in astrology, and the Mars at least delights the Sun, which is good for me because I don't have the strongest Sun. So this is what astrology is all about, you know? You balance certain things out in certain ways. So, let's go through a little bit of the last little bits of this. And this is, of course, coming from the book that I've just shown you. It's The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology. This is just getting the facts out. The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology by RYAN KURCZAK and Richard Fish is good at giving just the bare brass tacks, the bare brass notes on any planet and all the signs and all the houses. So, the Sun rules the sign of Leo. It's exalted in Aries and debilitated in Libra. It's exalted, you know, there's an interesting metaphor here, folks. When you consider what I said about the nature of the Sun is to come from within through self-authenticity. You never compromise the nature of yourself in order to adapt to the world around you. You can adapt without compromising yourself. And there's some times where there's aspects of your ego, the aspects of your desire for power that need to be humbled. That's the beauty of Saturn. Saturn makes us the lowliest of the lowly in order to understand that we are all one, we are all together. And Saturn gives you the power of social cohesion so that when people know that you're not looking to step on their head, you're looking to help them, because by helping others, you're also helping yourself, because we are all one under the sun and within the sun. People recognize that you have been doing this. You've been helping others instead of trying to drag them down in order to get ahead. This is why Saturn and Sun are very important together. And it's interesting that Saturn is exalted in Libra, but it's debilitated in Aries. And the Sun is exalted in Aries, but it's debilitated in Libra. Sometimes astrology shows us the wisdom of what the planets mean just by these figures. It's kind of an interesting thing. Astrology teaches itself once you just start talking about it and getting into it. But what I was going to say is that this is more on that same point. The Sun is exalted in Aries. That's the number one. That's the first sign. It's the self. Libra is other people, and that's where the Sun is debilitated. It's not to say Libra is a bad sign, but when it comes to you affirming what you need for yourself, the Sun does better in Aries because it grabs for it first. I'm going to grab what I need first with dignity and with resolution towards everybody else. But when it comes to competing, when it comes to getting the love that you seek, when it comes to manifesting the reality that you seek, it's not to say you got to step on anybody's head. A good Saturn will allow you to rise above, to hold to what is most important to your essential values without stepping on anybody's head. But being willing to compete and to win for the sake of the glory and honor of what is yours to win. If you put in the time and the effort and the energy and the love and the passion towards something, you're allowed to win. Winning is not necessarily a bad thing, because there's always more contests, and this is the nature of the Sun in Aries especially. I digress. The fact that the Sun is debilitated in Libra shows you that this particular aspect of the soul does not do well compromising itself, because it is the self. Chuggy Chaga Choo Choo is asked if Sun-dominant people have a yellowish tint to the skin. I wouldn't necessarily say so. Most of them have ruddy skin, and they often, anyone with a large emphasis on the sun can tend to enjoy the sun, and they can get a dark complexion typically, and they have yellowed eyes is what we read from Parashara. We're going to get a little bit into those details as we go along. They tend to have big teeth, and we kind of read a little bit of that from what Parashara said in our previous slide. Yellow eyes, which dispense honey. The body is square, stout, not always tall, but certainly stout when they have a sun dominance. They are pitta in constitution typically, and they can be masculine people that tend toward baldness. So, I'm just looking at the last of our little comments here. Got people talking and hanging out from all different places. Okay. Now, as we've said, the Sun is the Karaka, the significator of the first house, the ninth house, and the 10th houses. The Sun is correlated with the fire Panchatattva. That relates to tapas, relates to burning oneself up in the desire for whatever it is that they're going for, and it relates to the will. It's the third chakra. So it's typically said, you really need to have a good Mars in order to have a strong third chakra, but it is said that the Sun relates to it. And having a good Sun will help you with your third chakra if your Mars is lacking in your chart, and that also is vice versa. I'm just realizing that I do not have my water bottle. I'm going to have to go and get that once we are, probably before we start with the Graha Sutras. Now, the sun is, it's funny that the sun is the natural Atmakaraka. So people know about the Atmakaraka, or at least you should if you've been watching my channel, but it's okay if you don't. The Atmakaraka is a very, very significant planet in your chart. It relates to, it's defined by the planet with the highest degrees. And this is not including Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, or Rahu or Ketu, although some versions of Vedic astrology include Rahu and Ketu. I myself do not. It's one of those debated things. There's still lots of things being worked out in the Vedic astrology world. But many people, especially those in the lineage of Ernst Wilhelm and RYAN KURCZAK, and I believe Victakara, but don't quote me on it. I haven't asked them, actually, so I shouldn't even say that. But Ernst Wilhelm, RYAN KURCZAK, they believe that the Atmakaraka does not include Rahu and Ketu, although, again, maybe they're more open to it than I realize. Maybe I should just stick to my own story here. I digress. The Atmakaraka is the planet of the first 7 Grahas, the classical Grahas: Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. That the planet with the highest degrees in any sign is considered the Atmakaraka. So whatever is the Atmakaraka is almost like a second sun. I often like to tell people that my Atmakaraka is Venus. I'm a Leo rising, and I have that sun Leo energy, but I'm very a Venus-y, feminine person. I love getting into knowledge and all things related to knowledge and to comfort and to emotional comfort. That's because Venus is almost like a second sun to me, because it's my Atmakaraka. There's the natural Karakas in Jaimini. This is all coming from Jaimini astrology. It's the natural Karakas, and then there's it's kind of like the Chara Karakas. That's the changeable, where each person's chart has a different Chara Karakas. The Atmakaraka is the one with the most degrees. The Atmaya Karaka has the second most degrees. The Bhatri Karaka has the third most degrees, etc. So the Atmakaraka is really the most important of those. Many astrologers don't even use much of Jaimini, but will use the Atmakaraka because it's very significant. So the sun is like the natural Atmakaraka. It is, the Atma relates to the soul, and Karaka means significator. So that shows you the importance of what the sun is. It is naturally malefic. It's hot. It's a separating planet. And it is ruled by the 6th chakra at the 3rd eye, the Ajna chakra. And it shares this space with the moon. Cancer and Leo are at the top chakra. Then it's Gemini and Virgo. It's Taurus and Libra on the heart chakra. Aries and Scorpio on the 3rd chakra, etc. Glad Teresa is saying you are so Venus. I'm glad somebody might have mentioned that. Now, does this mean Kelzor Pine Tree is asking, does that mean a house ruled by sun has some significance to the Atmakaraka? The things signified by the Atmakaraka ship is really the soul. And the sun is everybody's soul. But the Atmakaraka also has something to do with the soul. So the house ruled by the sun, I'm assuming you mean that the house that Leo rules, has some significance to the Atmakaraka. I would say a little bit, yeah. Whatever Leo rules, according to your rising sign, is going to say something about how the sun energy interacts with your rising sign. The rising sign is the filter for all the lights of the planets. So let's say again, if you're an Aries rising, Leo rules the 5th sign from Aries. So Leo would be the 5th house lord. The sun would be the 5th house lord. And this would tell you something about the nature of how that person identifies with themselves, something that they can't compromise on. Aries can't compromise on their soul passion and purpose in life, the life path that they abide by and the passion that they abide by. And they would take that attitude to whatever their Atmakarika is. If they're a Venus Atmakarika, Venus for an Aries rules the 2nd house and the 7th house. So that would be involved in Leo's identity through the 5th house. Really, you see the combinations that can happen. You know, it's almost as if there's 7 different types of Aries rising, depending on which planet is the Atmakarika. And however that Atmakarika-ship rules out, it's always going to be involved with the source of Leo ruling that 5th house. Really, a lot. This is just beautiful stuff to talk about and to go through, you know. And anybody could, you know, we could talk for forever on the different combinations of Atmakarikas and rising signs. I've planned on doing it a little bit. We talk about it a little bit in our rising sign videos, if anybody's interested in that. So this has been some bare brass tacks on the nature of the Surya, the Graha Surya. Susie's asking, if your Atmakarika conjuncts the sun, what is the effect? That ultimately depends on, you know, that's an interesting thought, because the sun, being an aspect of your essential self, the principal archetype of selfhood, is going to be interacting with your personal self. And how the relationship between, so Susie's asked again, folks, what if your Atmakarika conjuncts the sun? What is the effect? The archetype of selfhood is something that's not quite our lived experience of it. The archetype of selfhood, whoever has their Atmakarika conjunct the sun, their self, whatever that personal planet is, has to deal with the archetype of selfhood in an objective way. Either a father figure or some kind of authority figure is going to pressure you to abide by whatever the nature of that Atmakarika planet is in a pressureful way, in a malefic, hot way, in order for you to grow that planet. And really, the only thing that could be expected from effects from that is it has to do with the nature of the planet that's conjunct the sun. You're going to have a hard time if you're a Venus Atmakarika like me, and you've got Venus conjunct the sun. But it would play out just as classic sun conjunct Venus. It depends on the sign. If that's happening in the sign of Aries, Venus wouldn't be having a terrible time because it's neutral in Aries, but the sun is exalted in Aries, so the archetype of selfhood is probably going to overcome the nature of Venus, which wants to be a diplomat, which wants to have a family, which wants to care about its partner more so, wants to enjoy life. You're going to have pressure from the government, the son or something, or the father or the family, to be a father figure, to be the big instigator of something that's going to draw you away from your personal enjoyment of Venus. If Mars is the Atmakarika and it's conjunct the sun, a similar thing's going to happen, but you're going to be much happier about it because Mars is okay with dealing with that hard, tough pressure of the archetype of the established self against the pressures of laziness and, you know, other aspects of reality. You know, Mars wants to sharpen its sword against the authority of the archetype of the self and the sun. So that's a little example of that, Susie. I hope that clarifies things a little bit for you. I'm very glad to be sharing this knowledge with you, Shravana. Now, we've been talking a lot about some specific things, folks. I got to get some water. I feel silly that I didn't grab it at the start. Kind of came in here in a rush. So, if you guys want to hang out for just about like 1 minute or two, I'm going to go get some water, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to rock and roll. And we're going to start going through the Graha Sutras by Ernst Wilhelm. And we're really going to get into the nature of what the sun is all about. I'll be right back. Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Now, let's start digging into the Graha Sutras by Ernst Wilhelm. Now, the first thing I'd like to say before we start here is that we're going to read a lot about the background archetypes of the soul, of the self, and all things related to the sun. And what you got to dig is that Ernst Wilhelm is he's very big on Shadbala. And Shadbala is a whole part of Vedic astrology that the Western world is learning to tap into. It just has to do with a lot of different things. My friend Teresa has just given me a $10 tip. I really appreciate you, Teresa. Bhuvana Gayam Surya Sanyamat, by Sanyama on the sun. It's the knowledge of the worlds. Thank you for that wonderful little note there, Teresa. I appreciate you. So, as we read into the Graha Sutras, we are going to be seeing the archetype and character of Leo and of the sun beyond all the figures we could give as astronomical cookbook stuff. This is the kind of the secret depth of knowledge. And so if you are a Leo rising, if the sun is your Atmakaraka, or if you have a dominant nature of the sun as your strongest Shadbala planet, then the qualities and themes related to the sun in Ernst Wilhelm's Graha Sutras will stand out in your character, soul, and spirit. So you can really expect that anybody that you know with Sun Atmakaraka, or Leo rising like myself, or most particularly anyone with strong sun dominance. Vedic people know what we mean by sun dominance. It relates to Shadbala. If you have most of your Shadbala is coming through the sun, then you will be portraying this energy. And Irene Mack is right to say that Teresa is always tipping me with with $10 and what have you. And you're right to say, Irene Mack, that it is very sweet of you. I love to do this stuff with you guys. Tips are what should I say? Tips are never expected, but always appreciated. It's like my little virtual cosmic hat that I can pass around just for doing something that I love. And it means a lot that you guys share that with me. So, let's start getting into the Graha Sutras by Ernst Wilhelm. When you get into the Graha Sutras, you learn Ernst begins by talking about what a Graha is. A Graha is known as, a planet is known as a Graha, which means seizing. It seizes. A planet is called a Graha since it seizes mankind as well as all other things, and puts upon him his astrologically fated destiny. Grahas are much more significant entities than mere tools of destiny, and this is the true import of the Grahas, as is given in Parashara's text, Brihat Parashara Horashastra. It's not merely a tool of destiny, it is the divinity within all beings. We are vessels for the divine narrative of light becoming its fullest self through our bodies and souls. So Ernst gives us a whole bunch of great stuff here. And a lot of this is coming right from the very beginning of Brihat Parashara Horashastra. Parashara talks about right off the bat, first thing he talks about with astrology. It's one of the very first things that we read about. We don't read about the zodiac until like 3 chapters in. We don't read about houses. We don't read about anything until we get quite a bit into it. The first thing we read is an almost spiritual and like Hindu religious consciousness. And mind you, when I say Hindu, the idea of Hinduism is that it's not a specific religion. It's rather a literary corpus of symbolisms related to human consciousness. And it's more, they're like almost spiritually scientific in the sense that you don't got to believe in anything in order to play around with these archetypes of consciousness. And so right off the bat, Parashara, when he talks about astrology, the first important thing that he begins with is talking about avatars that have come in Hindu literature, which relates to the archetypes of the planets. The avatar Rama comes from the sun. From the moon comes the Yadu Lord, and that's Krishna. Mars gives Narasimha. There's other names for that name that are not coming to me right now. From Mercury comes the Buddha. From Jupiter comes Vamana. That's Bhargava. Oh, excuse me. So Vamana comes from Jupiter. Bhargava, it's Parashurama, comes from Venus. Kurma comes from Saturn, the great tortoise. And from Rahu, we get Shukara Varaha, the boar. And from Ketu, the avatar Mina. So this is the avatars given for all the planets. And what we hear is that those with Para Atma as the larger portion are all known as heavenly. Those with Jiva as the larger portion are known as the living beings. Para Atma means that these avatars who have lived in these times, such as Rama for the sun, Krishna for the moon, these people embodied more of this para Atma energy than the Jiva. They were more of a living archetype than a human. And a lot of this is interesting literary mythological stuff. But there's a reason why Ernst comes through and talks about it. The Brihat Parashara Horashastra tells us the names of the more important avatars of the Hindu religion that have proceeded forth from each of the Grahas. These will be discussed in detail in the next chapter. Of course, we're only going to go through Rama because we're talking about the sun today. So all others are considered to be brought forth from the Grahas, that's including us. This means you and me, as well as all divine incarnations and all other creatures, have come from the Para Atma. All births have Para Atma nature, which is the nature of the Supreme Spirit. And that's really the sun. We are all born of the sun as sprites of the sun, as the eternal pervading divinity. Now, all spirits, all born on earth, also have jiva, which is the nature of living beings such as dwell on earth. If the Paramatma portion is the larger portion of a birth, then that birth is the birth of a holy personage, such as the 9 mentioned avatars, as well as those such as Christ or Muhammad, Krishna, possibly as well as Mahavatar Babaji, in my understanding. That comes from Yogananda's lineage. I digress. So if the para atma portion is greater in a person's soul, then they're going to be a holy personage. But if the jiva portion is larger, then the birth is of some other regular earthly creature, such as us ourselves, for the most part. So what we read is that all the grahas, the sun, etc., Brahma, Shiva, these and others are more para-atma abundant. The grahas have this paramatma consciousness. If they were not, how could they give birth to the many divine incarnations? The grahas, being direct manifestations of Vishnu, could have no less than paramatma consciousness. This paramatma is something that permeates the grahas, which means, again, that we are a part of it. But the reason Ernst brings this up this way, and this is the key point that I'm going to say here, this is how the Vedic people conceive of the grahas, is that the grahas are not simple lumps of dirt, minerals, and gases, but they are divine entities that have an important role in all of our lives. The paramatma consciousness of the grahas, it makes them living, acting beings that we can have a relationship with. For which reason, puja and mantras for the grahas are effective. We just got another tip from my friend Samantha Sylvester. Thank you so kindly, Samantha. I really appreciate that, and I think that was a wonderful time for that to happen, because that's one of the most important lines that I think I could give from this book. The grahas are living archetypes that are within us, and they are also objects that we can subject ourselves to through our consciousness. And this is why pujas and mantras to the planets are so effective. And one of the great gifts that Ernst gives us is to help us to understand that if we have a weak sun, if we have a weak moon, if we have a weak Mars, we can supplicate ourselves to the nature of the divine consciousness that has permeated the blueprint of the cosmos since before this galaxy even came about. The archetype of Mars in the 3rd chakra and Aries and Scorpio existed before the Mars of our galaxy came to be. And we can align ourselves with the nature of the spirit of these planets in order to open ourselves to that which might be lacking in our charts. So the cool thing about Vedic astrology is that a lot of people think that Vedic astrology is tough because you can have a bad planet placement. You can have tough planetary placements. The Vedic people will say it's no big deal because that's the karma of this present incarnation. It usually signifies that there's a blockage to the nadis of your fullest apprehension of soul consciousness. One of the channels of pure light energy going through your system have been blocked in the past. And usually you can pinpoint it and apply yourself to it so that that blockage is no longer there in this life. This is remedies that we talk about, The Surya mantra would be one of them for the sun. And that's why I use it to deal with my own ailments with masculine power and with not necessarily masculine power. The sun is really genderless at some level, but it is masculine in the way we apply ourselves to it. So, I digress. Thank you again, Samantha. Shout out to Samantha. Thank you, everybody, for saying that, because I appreciate you hanging out with me and tipping me. And it's nice for everybody to be hanging out here together and enjoying this conversation on a Sunday, the day of the sun, Surya. Now, let's start discussing. In our next chapter, we're going through the avatars of the Grahas. In particular, since we're talking about the sun, we're going to talk about Lord Rama, which we can read about in the beautiful, beautiful story of the Ramayana. I highly recommend. There's a great book. I got like the Penguin Books Classics version of the Ramayana, and it was it's so beautiful. The way it talks about the poetry of Indian culture that is contained in the Ramayana is some of the most beautiful that I have ever heard. But before we get to Rama, let's just do a quick little rundown here. This is the avatars of the Grahas. Though there are many, many divine incarnations, Hindu mythology gives primary importance to 9 of them. It's 1 for each Graha. As a student of astrology, it is well worth studying the lives of these avatars, as they shed some important light upon the nature of the Grahas that we're talking about. So, let's dig a little bit into how the character of Rama relates to the Graha Surya, the sun. And of course, this isn't just coming from Ernst Wilhelm. This is coming from Parashara. Parashara is the one who has got the deep psychedelic code of consciousness, who said that the sun relates with the character of Rama in the Ramayana and in the Vedic literature. Rama. Rama means dark, interestingly. It's interesting when you consider that it's the psychedelic figure of really the skin of those who have been bombarded by the sun tends to be dark. And the word Rama means dark, and Rama is the avatar of the sun. There's a psychedelic figuration there that would be hard to really say, but essentially shows that the nature of the most deep point in the sun is, you notice when you look at the symbol for the sun, it's white all around, it's radiating white, but there's a dark point in the middle. That darkness is the unmanifested soul that is always seeking manifestation through the radiant light of beingness on planet Earth. But there's a dark space within us that is pure Shiva, pure unmanifested potential. And this is the nature of the translucent colorlessness that is within the light of a personality, of someone that we see who's living their dharma. They're an open vessel to what is greater than themselves within themselves. Shravana has asked, do I think if avatars also had this ability, like we do, to work with planets to get better? I would say they would. In fact, their lives are living examples of their cohesion with the subjection to avatar consciousness and to the holy divine consciousness that comes before them. A lot of avatars like Rama are constantly praying to either Surya as an archetype or to, Rama was a living archetype of Surya, but Surya was an archetype even before Rama came along. Rama was the figure for it on our planet, but there could be universes with other galaxies, with other Earths, where human consciousness has grown to develop on literature that would portray the character of Rama, and there might have even been Ramas on other planets. And for all we know, Rama could have been praying to himself because he's the avatar of that. Psychedelic thing to think about, but that's a cool question, Shrav, and I hope that answers it a little bit. Although I would say Rama wouldn't have been praying to himself. He would have been praying to the archetype of Surya. And I would imagine they would do that in this way. So, I hope that answers your question, Shravana. Let's get into Rama, which is defined as dark. It's the avatara of the sun. Long ago, during the Treta Yuga, it's the second highest age, there was an Asura, a Titan king, by the name of Ravana, who was displaying great selfishness and arrogance, and who was fast breaking every code of Dharma. He was a great king, and he was very powerful, and he was quickly breaking every single code of Dharma. Ravana, though arrogant, had won many boons due to the strict penance he had performed. This really resonates with the character of the sun. A lot of people can be very mean people, but again, if you abide by the power within yourself to sacrifice, to apply penance, even somebody like Ravana can look within themselves, understand the nature of self-authenticity and self-authority, and pushing their consciousness to sacrifice, to embody the power from within themselves. And in this story, Ravana, though he was arrogant, he had won many boons due to the strict penance he had performed. These boons made him so powerful that no one could conquer Ravana or end his display of unrighteousness. And so adharma, unrighteousness, was becoming rampant in the world. In Sanskrit, whenever you put the letter A in front of a word, it negates that word. So dharma is righteousness, adharma is unrighteousness. And this was becoming rampant in the world. Brahma and the devas, the gods, they all went to the all-pervading Vishnu because they wanted to request his assistance in ridding the world of this demon Ravana. Vishnu promised to incarnate as a lord in the solar dynasty and put an end to Ravana and his unrighteous rule. All these Hindu stories, if you understand it correctly, there's a really psychedelic picture of the ego and all the aspects of divinity, seeing that the ego is becoming too much through the character of Ravana, and all the devas is all the other planets going to Vishnu, which is the moon, which is the ectoplasmic connection of Om, of the connecting the self to the world and to divinity, all of seeing it all as one. That's what Vishnu is. Whenever there's a problem in the Vedas, they all go to Vishnu, because Vishnu is connected to the earth, to the atmosphere, and to the sky of the divine, all at the same time. Each of these planets, even Rama, the sun, is only one planet in astrology, and it has to be balanced, and Vishnu is the one that sees it all within it all. So Vishnu is the one that reincarnates and brings Dharma back through the resolution of the beauty that Vishnu is. Vishnu was thus born as Rama, who exemplified all of the ideals of Dharma throughout the entirety of his life. Rama was of royal birth and was the crown prince of Ayodhya. However, through the scheming of one of his father's wives, the throne was unjustly taken from Rama, and he was exiled to the forest for 14 years. To ensure that his father's good name would remain unblemished, Rama willingly accepted the exile with even-minded calmness and detachment, even though his father had already died due to the grief caused by Rama's exile. It's kind of a heavy story, but it's all really metaphorical. Rama's wife, Sita, and his brother, Lakshman, could not part from Rama and followed him into the forest. Many adventures befell Rama during his exile, and not even once did he stir from the strict path of Dharma. After many years of living and wandering in the forest, news of Sita's beauty reached the ears of the Titan Ravana, who then, of course, abducted Sita, sent one of his guys, and snatched her away from Rama, hoping to make Sita his wife. Rama was heartbroken, and he made every effort to find Sita and rescue her from Ravana. After much time and effort, Rama came to eventually destroy Ravana, and Sita was returned to him. At that point, the purpose of Rama's incarnation had been fulfilled. He had destroyed Ravana, the evil demon ego, and exemplified the sacrifice of Dharma. The trials of Dharma, however, are hard, and Rama, after conquering Ravana, still had one more ideal to establish. After returning to his native city and becoming crowned, Rama heard that one of his subjects spoke ill of his wife. His subject declared that once a woman resides under the care of another man, she should not be allowed to return to her husband, though Rama might accept her because he was infatuated with her. He would never accept her. That Sita was taken against her will, that she remained outside Ravana's palace, only eating roots and fruits so as to eat what her husband Rama was eating in the forest while she waited for him to rescue her, was not considered by this critic. And this is what Sita did. Sita tried to get away from Ravana. Sita tried to get out of the consciousness of this egotistical, power-hungry Ravana. But Rama, unfortunately, because he is the arbiter of the sun, as is the nature of the difficulty of the sun, Rama, feeling that as king, his highest duty is to please his subjects, he had to abandon Sita to the ashram of Rishi Valmiki. Sita was pregnant at the time, and after giving birth to Rama's twin sons, she died. After hearing of Sita's death, Rama was sunk in sorrow, but he remembered that as a king has no right to have feelings of his own. So he concentrated on ruling the earth through the goodness of Dharma until his death. It almost gives you a little bit, like it makes you want to cry. Makes me want to cry. It's a really heavy story. We have to understand, of course, that Rama's life was marked by sacrifice. Not necessarily, that's the nature of the sun. If you truly want to abide by the heat and the pressure and the nature of the sun, then you have to abide by what is the true nature of Dharma. And even your ego's emotional desires to be comforted by things is not always what is the most dharmic thing. It's a funny balance here. It's a very heavy Vedic consciousness of a story, because they can be very sun-driven and hard. But it's a story, and it's an important story to understand the mythos of what the sun is all about. Rama's life was marked by sacrifice. The sacrifice of his kingdom, which once regained, led to the sacrifice of his beloved. It's why a lot of people when they uphold the Dharma, can't give as much love to their personal loved ones for emotional reasons if they are upholding a kingdom, if they are abiding by responsibilities that are greater than themselves, because our family is a part of ourselves. And it's difficult to abide by what's right, even when you have to sacrifice not only yourself, but your loved ones in order to do what's right for the greater good of the universe. It is the sun that provides the strength to make the hard sacrifices in life. The sun also demands personal sacrifices for the sake of duty, the well-being of others, and for one's spiritual development. If the sun is strong and well-disposed in the horoscope, an individual will have the ability to make these necessary sacrifices. Rama means dark, and Lord Rama was named this on account of having a dark cast on his skin. While the sun is, of course, not dark, those people and races living on Earth that are exposed to the sun darken. Metaphorically, and possibly literally, Rama had much experience in and under the sun. It is correct to say that the sun is steady, persistent, vital for life, and can be so harsh. Cool. It's interesting that you guys are talking some amazing things here. Irene says she dreamed of Shiva before she even studied these things. I think that's amazing. Susie dreamed of Ganesha and then the goddess. Very interesting. So, that was the story of Rama. And really, it's probably one of the best stories you could hope for in talking about the nature of these Grahas. In particular, the sun. The Avatar stories are, like, Ernst does such a great job of typifying the character and the archetype of a planet through these stories, you know? Now, next up in our story, we're going to be hearing a little bit of an important factor of the nature of 4 particular planets. That's the sun, the moon, Mars, and Rahu. As planets, tend to have this sort of sacrificial nature and this narrative of a truly soul-centric consciousness. And anybody who has consciousness or a dominance of the sun, the moon, Mars, or Rahu has a certain nobility of spirit that is being conveyed here. So here Parashara tells us there's a split in the planets where 4 of them have more abundance of this para Atman than Jiva. Rama and Krishna, O wise. Likewise, Narasimha and Sukara, it's Varaha, it's Rahu. These are full avatars, and the others are somewhat possessed of a Jiva portion. The 4 avatars, it's Rama, the sun, Krishna, the moon, Narasimha, Mars, and Varaha, it's Rahu. These are full avatars who possess only Paramatma consciousness. These 4 are the highest manifestation of God, and being in their presence is considered no different than being in the presence of God. These four grahas, more so than any of the other grahas, rule the self, the continually progressing and growing self. The sun is the true self in the light of consciousness. The moon is the individual consciousness. Mars represents how the individual exerts what is in his consciousness. And Rahu represents the birth of the individual consciousness. Thus, these four grahas all have to do with the self, though in very different ways, as you will come to see as you read this text. In the kingdom of the body, it is the self who is dominant and who rules, just as in the kingdom of the world it is God. Just as God has full sway and power, a full avatara who is possessed of only Paramatma consciousness has full sway and power. Since the full avatars were brought forth through the sun, moon, Mars, and Rahu, these four grahas and the grahas that endow these are the grahas that endow a person with presence and power. So it's very important when you regard the sun, the moon, Mars, and Rahu. These are the planets that endow a person with true presence and power. Individuals with these four grahas prominent and strong have greater power to create, to make things happen, and to rule their lives from within themselves, because they are living from the inherent sacrifice to dharmic principles which permeate transcendentally beyond the affairs of this individual incarnation and of everybody's incarnation. All the people who do great dharmic things, from Mahatma Gandhi to the great, whoever else you could consider as the most dharmic people, are doing things because they're doing it for the self in one, which is the self in all. These people will more likely rule in their relationships, business, family, friendships, and in their profession, which means to be self-employed or independently employed. Now, if the rising sign or the 10th lord is joined with one of these grahas, the sun, the moon, Mars, or Rahu, or if these grahas are in the rising sign or the 10th house, such will likely be the case. If you have sun, moon, Mars, or Rahu in the 1st house or the 10th house, or these planets are connected to the 1st lord or the 10th lord, then you will likely rule your kingdom with this presence and power that we're talking about. These grahas allow the individual to be the master of their own lives in accordance with the general strength of the individual's character and of these grahas. So that's an interesting thing to consider. Ernst is kind of showing us the importance of just a very deep breakdown of the different roles that the grahas play in the casuistry of human consciousness and the soul. Now, we are going to take a little bit of a look into the names of Surya, the names of the grahas. Parashara mentions, this is from the nature and form of the grahas, verse 10. Now the planets, the sun, moon, Mars, and Mercury, so also Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu successively. You'll notice this comes in the days of the week. Sunday, Moon Day, Mardi, Mars, Tuesday, Mercredi, Wednesday, Mercury. Jupiter is Thursday, Venus is Friday, Saturn is Saturday. So Vedic astrology considers these 9 grahas. The last word in the sutra above, successively, is particularly important as it points out that the order of the grahas, as mentioned in this sutra, is the natural, normal order of the grahas. This is why I go through this order in my rising sign videos. This is important, as many sutras give information about each graha that is meant to be taken in the order of the grahas and understood in the order of the grahas. In regards to anything preserved in the Sanskrit language, the name by which something is known always has much to reveal. So, these are worth studying. Now, I'm just going to throw on a sweater. It's unfortunate that my house gets a little bit chillier than I would like it to be. Ooh. Okay. I really like this shirt. I got this new shirt, and I had a feeling I might not be able to use it for the whole video because it's chilly, but that's okay. I'm in Canada. I'm used to it. Okay. Now, let's go through the names of the sun. The sun is said to have more names than any of the other grahas, which is no surprise since the sun is the most obvious object in the sky. It's a daily object of reverence of the ancient Vedic culture. The most common name for the sun is Surya, which means the supreme light, though the sun is also commonly referred to as Ravi, the firebird, as the hot object soaring through the sky. Another very commonly used name of the sun is Arka, the ray, as the prime illuminating ray of light and heat. The sun is also known as Aditya, which means the son of Aditi. Aditi being the mother of the gods, whose name refers to the ideals of freedom, boundlessness, perfection, and infinity. The mother, the great mother, I'm going to be talking about the great mother in this philosophical video that I've got coming up. It's going to be called Two Models of the Cosmos. It's the Western model and the Vedic model. And the Vedic model considered the zero long before the Western people did with their 1 and 2 and 3 all the way to 10. The Vedic people always had this idea of the zero as the divine mother from which all things are birthed. And that's Aditi. The sun, as Aditi's child, thus represents these qualities to the greatest capacity that they can be achieved. And that's capacities of freedom, boundlessness, perfection, and infinity. It's like infinity made manifest and real through the one, the sun. The role of the sun as the cause of the day is emphasized by his names Dinakrit, Dinakarta, and Divakara, all which mean the maker of the day. As the producer of the day, the sun banishes the darkness of night as well as the darkness of the ignorance of the self. The sun, as Dinesha, the lord of the day, repeats this idea, and as Tamohanta, darkness killing, confirms this idea. Sunlight is known to purify, and thus the sun is known as Pusha and Pushan, both of which mean the best purifier. The sun does this in the horoscope by representing the purifying fire of the body, as well as representing the inexorable self that brings about the eventual purification of all our actions and desires. And the sun does this to whatever touches in the chart, by sign, by house, and by aspect, by conjunction. It bleaches to the bones whatever is associated with it. Thus, usually, whenever we have any other planet that's with the sun is going to beat the heck out of it. But that's because there's a nature in the sun that wants to embody the pure Aditi nature of boundlessness and perfection. And most other planets abide by the ego at some level, abide by the nature of whatever that planet is associated with in connection to the attachments that we've grown in this incarnation. So when the sun is touching a planet, it's going to cause pain there. But a lot of the times it's a necessary pain for the soul. It's just there are some times when to have them both together like that is difficult, especially when the sun is with a planet who has the sun for an enemy, such as Venus and Saturn in particular. The sun is Savita, the vivifier, that which energizes and propels everything. As Ina, the powerful, as that which holds the greatest power over the earth, as the cause of the seasons, weather, and even the course of the earth, and as that which holds the greatest power in the horoscope. The sun, being the soul, is also called Hamsa, swan. Swans being a symbol for the soul, with all their gentleness and all their natural grace of not thinking of the movement of their bodies. The whiteness of the swan represents the purity of the soul, while the migratory nature of the swan represents the soul's migration from body to body and life to life. You might recognize the word Hamsa from the name of one of my great heroes. It's Paramahamsa Yogananda. Hamsa, Paramahamsa means the great swan, which is just a cool little thing there. Now, the sun is called Mitra. It's a child of Aditi and the ruler of the Sara, solar month of Sagittarius. Mitra means friend, and this name of the sun symbolizes that the only true friend is the soul. As one discovers their soul nature, they thus become a friend to all. The self in one is the self in all. Those who have reached the goal of self-discovery are true friends of man. The sun is also called Shura, hero, giving the capacity to rise above oneself in order to fulfill great deeds. That's a deep one. Now, obvious names of the sun are Tikshnamsha, it's hot raid, Tapana, the burning, Prabhakara, it's the radiance maker, Panu, it's light, and Bhaskara, it's the light maker. Now, a more colorful name of the sun is Aruna, which is the reddish color in the sky at dawn, for which the sun is responsible. We also have Divamani, the day jewel, and Jumani, the sky jewel. These reveal the esteemed value of the sun and all it represents. And finally, of a special interest to astrologers, the sun is known as Graharajna, or Graharajna and Grahapati. It's the king and lord of the Grahas, which of course all revolve around the sun. Radiance maker, certainly Mia Moore. A surprising name of the sun mentioned in the medieval Vedic astrological texts is Heli, and this is a Greek name for the sun. Though the sun is not referred to this name in the sutras giving astrological techniques and yogas, it is often mentioned by this name, along with other names, in the lists of planetary names given in several texts, most notably the Brihat Jataka. The fact that this name of the sun is found in the Indian astrological texts gives a hint of the interchange that took place between the learned men of the Greeks and the learned men on the Indian subcontinent during the centuries following Alexander the Great. This is a time that I'm going to discuss a lot next week when I talk about the sidereal tropical debate. That's going to be an important video for anyone who wants to know the theory of my basic background understanding of what makes tropical Vedic astrology the most important thing. Check that out next week. It's going to be a good time. This time where Heli is borrowed from the Greeks, there was a real melting pot of things that happened just after Alexander the Great, where all cultures came together and discussed astrology together. And there are remnants of this in Vedic medieval texts where they use Greek names for things like the sun, for example. It's a very important time in history. I'm glad Ernst often talks about it. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we come along, glad to be hanging out with you guys here for this Sunday ritual, as Teresa says. It's a pleasure having you guys all being here with me live. Makes it that much more special. Next up, we're talking about Samya and Krura Grahas. So we've done a lot of really archetypal readings on the nature of the planet, the sun. There's a lot of background philosophical understanding of what the sun's all about. Now we're going to start to see how Parashara's text gives us actual understandings of how the planets are embodied as astrological figures in an astrology chart with qualities that we can quantify in contrast to the other planets, which make up part of how you can expect the sun to interact with other planets. Samya means gentle and Krura means cruel. I don't know if you could guess. I wonder if anybody, let's have a quick, if anybody feels like typing. Can anybody guess, of these two options, what do you think the sun is going to portray? Is it a Samya planet, a gentle benefic planet? Or is it a Krura, a malefic planet, a cruel planet? Feel free to type in the text box there, folks. Figured I would have a little bit of fun here and seeing if you guys would be engaged and be a part of the fun here. I know it usually takes just a moment for my text box to keep up and to show. Very good, guys. Looks like Susie and Mia Moore have got it correct. I'm sure that as some people are still watching and trying to keep up with previous in the video, Susie has said cruel, and Mia Moore has said there's nothing gentle about the sun. And that is correct, as we have read about it. The story of Rama tells us the whole trip. The sun is considered a Krura Graha, and anything with the sun is going to be bleached and burned, as we've talked about. Correct, Samantha. The sun is certainly malefic. So, what we read from Parashara is the sun, Saturn, Mars, the waning moon, and Rahu and Ketu are considered Krura. It's cruel. The remaining Grahas are Samya, gentle. And Mercury can become Krura if it is joined with the Krura. This is the mutable nature of Mercury. The nature of the mind is this permeable, vibratory essence. And the more, whatever you constantly impart to the mind through Mercury, Mercury will imbibe that nature. Usually Mercury is either neutral because it's not close to any planet, or it will be with the sun because the Mercury is close to the sun. So it'll be either with Venus, or it'll be with the sun, or it'll be by itself, or with any of the other planets. But those are the most common conjunctions of Mercury. I would say Mia Moore has asked, is the sun tougher than Saturn? And I believe that Ernst actually tells us that Saturn is the more difficult planet. I'm just going to do a quick poke around. I believe, so Mia Moore has asked if the sun is tougher than Saturn as a malefic, and I believe that the Saturn is actually the tougher planet. I've seen it in this text, and I believe we're going to read it as we come along. So let's see if we can actually... but I believe that Saturn is the tougher planet that causes more difficulty than the sun. So let's see if we come across that as we read along. That's an interesting... Teresa has said Saturn is the son of the sun. I have heard that in Greek astrology, but the resonance for that is not coming to me right now, Teresa, so I don't want to say exactly archetypally if that is the case. I often would prefer to say I don't know than to say yes for sure when I'm not sure. So let's see if that comes along as well, Teresa, whether Saturn is the son of the sun. So let's talk about cruel planets versus benefic planets. There are several ways in which Grahas are divided into supportive and disruptive influences. One such way is based upon their natural tendencies. On account of their natural tendencies, there are two distinct types of Grahas: Saumya, which is gentle Grahas, and Krura, cruel Grahas. The gentle Grahas are those whose innate nature causes them to be helpful, supportive, and comforting towards those other Grahas that they influence. Krura Grahas are those Grahas whose innate nature cause them to be harmful, disruptive, and pain-causing towards those other Grahas that they influence. And we're about to read that sometimes the Krura Grahas can actually be good when you have to be tough. And the benefic Grahas can actually be bad when you have to be tough. You've heard me talk about this in my rising sign videos. Sometimes the benefic Grahas can be a little bit too lackadaisy, too optimistic and all-opening to difficult situations. So, each Graha has an ill as well as a desirable aspect, whether they're a cruel planet or a benefic planet. They have goodness and they have badness. The essential difference between cruel and gentle Grahas is that a cruel Graha gives whatever ill it has to the Grahas that it influences while holding back anything desirable that it may have. A gentle Graha, on the other hand, gives whatever desirable thing it may have to the Grahas that it influences while holding back any ill that it may be suffering. So, for example, if Venus is with the sun will give whatever ill it has to Venus while holding back anything desirable that the sun has for Venus. Venus does the opposite. Venus gives whatever desirable thing it may have to the Grahas it influences while holding back any ill that it may be suffering. It kind of becomes a doormat and suffers silently and accepts suffering in this way when Venus is with any planet, really. It's subservient to whatever is symbolized by the planet that it's with. So in this way, Grahas operate exactly as do people. A cruel person gives whatever trouble he can to the people he is around and holds on to any desirable thing he may have for himself. A gentle person, on the other hand, gives whatever desirable thing he can to the people he is around and holds back any ill that he may be suffering. Krura Grahas provide the many lessons in hardships in life, while Saumya Grahas, the gentle Grahas, provide the capacity to learn the lessons and to aid and the aid that's necessary to survive and keep them healthy. Cruel Grahas provide the stress that is strengthening, while gentle Grahas provide the comfort which is nurturing. Together, and only together, they help a person to develop healthily when they're not getting in each other's way. Alone, the cruel Grahas would only break a person's mind and body, while gentle Grahas alone would only cause excess and stagnation of the mind and body. Regardless of whether a Graha is gentle or cruel, each Graha has something desirable to give. Saturn, for instance, represents longevity and the ability of the body to resist bacteria before succumbing to disease. Mars represents buildings, without which none of us would have a home. Each Graha is very important for our survival, well-being, and happiness. It's not necessarily a good thing to have one of your cruel planets, which you use to carve into reality in order to get what your needs are and to meet your objective goals and desires. It's not good to have one of those weakened in the chart for any reason, because when it comes time for that aspect of reality that we all can't escape from to be hard and to be real and to be true, you will have a hard time holding on to those moments, right? Grahas manifest effects on many different levels. It's only in the context of being supportive and disruptive towards each other's natural indications that Grahas behave as really Saumya and Krura. On other levels, any Graha may be supportive or disruptive, so do not be too quick to judge any one Graha's effects. Any Graha, for instance, can be productive or destructive towards the bhava in which it is placed, and this has nothing to do with its Krura or Saumya nature. So as a result, cruel Grahas will quite often produce very good things, and the gentle Saumya Grahas will just as often disrupt desirable things. Gentle and cruel Grahas are similar in the fact that on account of their experiences, they attempt to find happiness, security, well-being, etc. by developing the house, that's a bhava, the house in which they are placed. Whether they're cruel or gentle, they are looking to find happiness, security, and well-being by developing the house in which they are placed. Cruel planets support the natural inclinations of the Grahas which they influence, as a result of the individual experiencing the peace and the happiness of that gentle planet. The individual has time, luxury, and resources to develop the house in which that gentle planet is placed. And in developing that house, they find fulfillment. Now, the cruel Grahas harm the indications of the other Grahas around them that they influence. The harm, the loss, the pain, and etc. that the native experiences motivate the individual to grow and change and to become strong, which they do as they develop the house in which the cruel Graha is found. Usually the idea is that you don't want these guys to be in each other's, you want them to stay in each other, in their own lane, right? So that your good aspects and your good, gentle proclivities are not ruined by a desire to get more out of them. And your desire to be hard and tough in aligning with what your objective needs are is not curtailed by what I call that adaptivity that Gabor Mate talks about, where you become so attached to other people nurturing you in a way that you lose your ability to be hard and real for getting things for yourself. That's the cruel Grahas. You don't necessarily want these two always to come together. But it depends, It wouldn't be such a bad thing for, like, the moon and sun to be conjunct because they're friends. The moon, if it's benefic and it's waxing, it's ahead of the sun. And if the sun and the moon are together and the moon is ahead, the moon's still considered a benefic planet at that point. It's waxing. And it's getting burned a bit by the sun, but because they're friends, the moon is helping the sun and the sun is sharpening the moon. These, new moon people can be kind of tough personalities in this way, but they're also adaptive. So this is an example of how there's so many contexts of how you got to take a cruel planet being with a gentle planet, right? So let's look at the sun's Krura nature. The sun represents the growth of the self, which is the result of sacrifice, and thus the sun is a Krura Graha. The natural effects of those Grahas which the sun influences are those things from which a person becomes separated. So a person will tend to become separated from whatever the sun touches. It's like Rama going away from his kingdom, his beloved kingdom, and then even going away from his beloved wife in the end, in order to abide by the dharma of the sun, of what he needs to do for his soul. In becoming separated from these things, the individual realizes the importance of being an honorable, dutiful, and inspired person. In separating us from these things, the sun demands that we become better people, stronger, more able, and more self-reliant, a person better able to provide for others. On account of the losses that the sun causes towards those grahas that it is influencing, a person becomes inspired to become the best of what they can be in the context of the house in which the sun is placed. For example, if the sun is placed in the 10th house, a person becomes inspired to be the best leader they can be. In the 3rd house, the sun inspires a person to be the strongest and most talented that they can be. In the 2nd house, the sun inspires a person to be the most responsible that he can be. In whichever house the sun is placed, a person works towards being the best they know how to be as a result of suffering the losses of those grahas that the sun influences, by house, by sign, by aspect, or by conjunction, or what have you. Even by Rashi aspect, If the sun is if the sun is in the 2nd house, and it's trine to Venus, which is in, let's say, the 6th house, the sun is burning Venus out, and especially if the sun is in a strong sign, like if it's in Leo in the 2nd house, it has lots of strength. It's going to have to sacrifice what it's aspecting by its trine to Venus. Even though it's a trine, in Vedic astrology, trines don't necessarily mean a good thing. The sun aspecting Venus by trine is still going to burn Venus. And this would really indicate a need for the responsibility that the sun wants to express itself through in the 2nd house. The 2nd house is about having responsibility for many different things: a home, a family, businesses, entrepreneurial enterprises. The responsibility of the sun needs to exercise that responsibility by burning a little bit of its romantic and loving proclivities of Venus, of the partner. You'd expect such a person to have a partner who would be ready to not be coddled by the sun person who has the sun in the second, who has all these responsibilities that their soul is called to develop a hard but real sense of responsibility for. It's the same thing for the sun in any house, right? So on account of experiencing separation in respect to those things indicated by the grahas that the sun influences, the individual will come to realize that they can never truly be part of something or bonded to something of this world. All they can truly possess and be with is their own honor and esteem, and so they attempt to develop the house in which the sun is placed as a means to live honorably, and not necessarily so they can share and find happiness in the things of the house, which they can never bring the experiences of the soul that one is truly desiring. The house that the sun is in, or any planet that the sun is touching, nothing in this world can ever truly bring the experiences of the soul that one is truly desiring. That's why the sun uses whatever it touches as a grip for the experience of that which is beyond the sensations of the heart and of the body and of the mind on earth. That is the hungry, real, ever so real nature of the soul in all of us. So, Parashara gives us a little bit more about the nature of these cruel planets. Jupiter and Venus are spoken of as auspicious. The moon is somewhat so. Mercury is neutral. And called evil are the sun, Saturn, and Mars. The waxing moon, Mercury, Jupiter, and Venus are more and more strong. And the waning moon, the sun, Saturn, and Mars' strength succeed one another. So this is to answer I believe it was Miyamor. Yes. So Miyamor asked if the Saturn is tougher than the sun as a Krura planet. The answer is yes. And you might not think it, but even tougher than Saturn is Mars in its cruelness. That is what we're being given by Parashara here. The waning moon is a malefic, but it's the least malefic. The sun is the second, I should put it this way. Mars is the most malefic. Saturn is the second most. The sun is the third most. And the waning moon is the least malefic, but still malefic of the malefics. So amongst the Krura Grahas, the waning moon is the least cruel. Mercury when it is when it's conjunct a cruel planet, is even a bit more cruel than the waning moon. The sun is crueler than these two. Saturn is much crueler than the sun, and Mars is the cruelest. So, let's see here. The sun will cause separation with those grahas it influences, but this will be because of something else that must be done. It will not necessarily be a permanent separation, and so it's not felt as painfully as the separation caused by Saturn. It will be not necessarily a permanent separation, just such as the example we gave with the sun in the second house trine to Venus in the sixth house. Such a sun will be, because it's trine Venus, it will be separating itself from the love and coddling of its partner. But that doesn't mean it's going to completely go away. That doesn't mean that you can't have love at all. Plenty of people have Venus trine the sun and they still have love. But there will be a marked sacrifice of the coddling for the nature of what the sun is trying to build on in its house. It's not felt as painfully as the separation caused by Saturn, which feels a little bit more like the sun. You are taking that separation on because it's a worthy feeling in the soul. It's like you choose to sacrifice the coddling of your wife or your husband through Venus because of something more important to the soul. And you talk about it and you agree upon it. Saturn's separation is different. Saturn's separation is like illness. It happens to you. You don't choose it. You have to deal with it. That's partly why Saturn's is so much crueler. Mars is the cruelest, for he gives the crisis and pains that are not part of the natural process of life and death, like a smashing accident, a fire, the attack of a mugger. These kind of things tend to be regarded by Mars, according to Ernst. So the gentle and cruel quality of the Grahas represent their innate natures. Gentle Grahas are kind, gentle, accepting, and comforting, and they support the natural inclinations of the other planets that they influence. Cruel planets are cruel, hard, demanding, stressful, and they harm the natural inclinations of whatever they touch, all while forcing us to work on ourselves if we want to be happy. All in all, whether it's a Krura planet or a gentle planet, all the planets have the goal of developing the house in which they're placed. Grahas are not always successful in this endeavor, and they may in fact destroy the house instead. This is a matter of predictive astrology and is beyond the scope of this text, which has as its goal the dissemination of the knowledge of the Grahas. So there's a lot of stuff that can be, a lot of different configurations that need to be worked out in order to see if any planet, whether it's a gentle or cruel one, is going to just wreck the house that it's in. That's the nature of predictive astrology and is not necessarily something we can get into in this reading. Now we hear that there is a self aspect of each planet. The sun is Sarva Atman. The moon is Manas. Mars is Sattvam. The consciousness spoken is Mercury, giving speech. Jupiter is joy, giving knowing. Venus is the giver of virya, vitality. And Saturn grants sorrow, as told by the ancient rishis. So the sun is Sarva Atman. This means whole self. This has several connotations. Spiritually, Sarva Atman is the soul, and thus the sun represents the soul. Soul, of course, being beyond creation, cannot be truly represented by anything in creation, including any graha. What the sun actually represents is the individual's intuitive knowing of his or her soul nature. Not every soul is like the nature of the sun, but the sun is metaphorically descriptive of our intuition of what our individual soul nature is. The intuitive knowing of one's soul nature provides confidence, self-esteem, nobility, and the capacity to sacrifice the things of the world for higher purposes. The sun thus represents all of these soul qualities. Physically, the whole self represents the body. The sun represents the body in its entirety. A robust and non-afflicted sun largely ensures the integrity and health of the physical body. It represents us as a complete person with soul and body, mind, character communicating what is in his or her consciousness, possessing the capacity for knowledge and joy, with vital energy, and bearing one's sorrows. In short, a person is really made up of all 7 grahas, but the sun is our ability to be fully in the presence of the soul, which is beyond them all. Now, there's so much in this book that we could go through, and I am taking the liberty to only pick a few certain things to be going through here. One of the things that we have is the idea of the planetary kingdom. Of course, this is all coming from Parashara. This is coming from the ancient Sanskrit of ancient times. And Parashara is the brilliant sage who's given us so much of this stuff. This is the planet. In the planetary kingdom, the sun and moon are the sovereigns. The overseer is Mars, Mercury is the young sovereign, Jupiter and Venus are counselors, and the slave ship is Saturn. Each planet plays a part in the kingdom of the human character. The sun and moon are the sovereigns, the king and queen. The sun is the king and the moon is the queen. In a democratic society, the sun is the president or elected official in charge, and the moon is the gentle face of the presidency, normally the first lady. In the kingdom of the self, the sun and moon are also the rulers, the sun, the soul, and the moon, the individuality. The sun gives the self the intelligence and confidence with which to act, as through the strength of the king. If the sun is well situated, the individual acts confidently, acts intelligently, and is steadfast and reliable. If the sun is afflicted, the individual is insecure, inconstant, and acts out of fears, compulsions, and peer pressure. In short, not due to their intelligence. So, this really shows us a little bit more of the sun is relating to this king, the kingship inside of all of us. Now, one of the great metaphors that we could give to each planet is their presiding deities. And this is not necessarily the same thing as the avatars. This is a deity that is given. I'm just checking out one of our questions here. Susie, if the sun and Saturn look at each other opposition, then what kind of separation might that cause? Would that depend on the houses? Susie has asked, if Sun and Saturn look at each other with an opposition aspect, then what kind of separation might that cause? Would that depend on the houses? Yeah, it would certainly depend on the houses to see the physical manifestation of what would be trying to be built on. You know, let's say the sun is in the second house and Saturn is in the eighth house. Depending on the strength of these planets and the different signs that they're in. With an opposition aspect, you've always got the signs are either in a fire and air sign or a water and earth sign. What I mean by that is that I've often conveyed in my astrology courses that what I meant to say is the fire and water signs are ruled by Sun, Moon, Jupiter, and Sun, Moon, Jupiter, and Mars. Those are the fire and water signs. Saturn, Mercury, and Venus they rule the earth and air signs. So whenever you have an opposition in signs, it's always going to be in the water. One side is going to be in the fire and water grouping. The other side is going to be in the air and earth grouping. So let's say, usually what this means is that the sun, for example, if we've got the sun and Saturn opposite each other, they are going to be in a sign that either caters to their nature or doesn't. If you've got the sun in Sagittarius and Saturn is in Gemini, both of those are pretty neutral. They're in the signs of friends. So those two would be pretty much neutral, and they would be affecting each other. So to kind of get back to your point, what you're asking there, Susie, let's say we've got the sun in Sagittarius in the second house. That would be a Scorpio rising. The sun is in Sagittarius, and Saturn is way over here in Gemini in the eighth house. These would be in neutral sign positions, and these two would be in an opposition aspect. So the sun would be trying to develop on the second house, trying to develop on its responsibilities. And Saturn would be forcing the person through some kind of reality, through some kind of 8th house reality, through Saturn, whether it's illness, whether it is through a limitation in the person. They will have to use the resources of through Saturn of the other people around them. And they'll have to do favors for other people and really even conscript themselves to the power of, like, opportunistic powers of, say, even like the stock market, that's like 8th house stuff, or powerful people in their lives that they would have to be subservient to. Whether that's big business or just business partners. Saturn in the 8th will need to develop on these kinds of things, and this would ultimately undermine the solidity that the sun is trying to build with its responsibilities, its personal wealth, its personal resources, its personal solid enterprise through the 2nd house. Saturn would put stress from the 8th house on the sun in the 2nd house, because the sun in the 2nd house would want to build on its own enterprise, its own self-employment. Saturn in the 8th would force the sun to be involved with other people, and other people's are not secure. Like, other people don't have an agenda that will always align with yours. This is an example of the sun and Saturn being opposite each other in the 2nd and the 8th house, and it's an example of how there's two different separating factors, where the Saturn is separating the sun from its personal resource autonomy. And the sun, by wanting to build on its own thing, is also going to burn out Saturn by not necessarily catering to every opportunity that comes along, because Saturn wants to build on opportunism in the 8th. So I hope that clarifies that a little bit there, Susie. Basically, again, Susie was asking if Saturn and Sun look at each other, then what kind of separation might that cause between each other? So, that's kind of how that can unfold. So, the next thing we're looking at here is our presiding deities of the Grahas. I want to try and keep as close to we can as our to the nature of our text here. There's some great stuff that comes from the deities of each of the Grahas. The Grahas are considered to be under the operational power. Thank you, Susie. I'm glad that those examples came through for you. The Grahas are considered to be under the operational power of several deities. More than one deity typically operates through each of the Grahas. So there are seeming contradictions between different texts on the deities of each planet. It's not that these texts contradict each other, rather they're on different levels of existence and activity. These deities represent different things. So here we will largely but not entirely ignore the arrangements of deities given by Upadesha Sutras. And we're going to concentrate on describing the deities given by Parashara, along with a few extra thoughts as believed necessary for a well-rounded study. So for the sun, we have Vahni, also known as Agni. Vahni literally means conveyor, like a conveyor belt spitting something out from within. It alludes to the idea that fire conveys that which it burns upward to the realms of the gods. This fire itself is known as Agni. Agni and Vahni are interchangeable names for this very same fire. Like fire is hidden in the wood, Agni represents the spirit hidden in matter. Agni is the cosmic light that permeates all things, thus being the support of all things. To return to this light is to lose form, just as are the sacrifices that are consumed in the fire. Agni, as the presiding deity of the sun, burns up in sacrifice those things which one must necessarily be removed from so that one may become a greater being. To sacrifice is to give up something small, something that one can afford to give up, though the giving up may be painful in order to achieve something greater. The sacrifices demanded by the sun are therefore gateways to greater opportunities, and we really should understand it as such whenever we're dealing with the nature of the sun in our chart and what is conveyed there, what difficulties are conveyed by the sun, etc. If you ever get a reading from me and I talk about how the sun is touching a planet in a way that causes difficulty, you got to understand the nature of the sacrifice that's coming through the sun there. Is sometimes for the most part, it's going to be a positive thing spiritually. And as I always like to say, things that are positive spiritually don't always feel constructive materially. It's the nature of sacrifice, the nature of the destiny of moksha that is within all of us, helping us to embody the true light of consciousness and to let go of the darkness of fragmentation. So one of the next things we are going to talk about is grahas and gender. There's this masculine and feminine principle in the grahas. Mercury and Saturn are considered eunuch, meaning neuter, neutral, genderless. Young women are the Moon and Venus, twice born. And men are to be known the remaining, that's Sun, Mars, and Jupiter. So the Sun is, of course, considered to be a masculine graha. Ernst notes that there's an ancient idea that the grahas are male deities and are referred to as male throughout this text. That's because the signs and houses are considered to be the feminine womb tissue, and the planets are like the sperm avatar conscience. The planets are like conscience, and the houses and signs and even aspects are more of Lakshmi. They're more the dimension of the spark. So the grahas are always called male deities, but they each behave, however, in a more masculine, feminine, or neutral manner. They also each produce male, female, or neuter creations. Now, the masculine grahas are initiating, action-centered, and proactive. And so anyone who has a predominance of the sun is going to have this quality of character, typically. They feel loved, happy, and worthwhile when they are respected and appreciated for what they do, say, and think. They find gratification in helping those weaker, more vulnerable, or less able than themselves. When they do something beneficial or productive, they feel happy and satisfied. Masculine grahas have the capacity to do something even when they do not feel like it, which is a very powerful thing. This really isn't, these days, trying to define what is masculine is a tough thing. And I think that this is a great little depiction of what exactly masculinity is according to the ancient Vedic ideal. Feel free to pause that and just get an understanding of it, at least from Ernst Wilhelm's perspective, which I think is a formidable perspective. Now, the sun, we read, is the most masculine of all the grahas. He is 100% masculine, which is shown by the fact that the sun rules only one sign, which is Leo, which is male as compared to the other male grahas that rule both one male sign and one female sign, right? Mars rules Aries, which is a male sign, but it also rules Scorpio and has a feminine dimension to it. Jupiter rules Sagittarius, which is male, but it also rules Pisces, which is water, and has a feminine yin dimension to it. The sun only rules one sign, and it's the most masculine fixed fire sign, Leo. The sun is action-centered, but not rash. He is steady and consistent in his action. If the sun is poorly situated in the horoscope, then a person might lack consistency and steadfastness. All masculine grahas do. Just as all masculine grahas do. The sun feels loved and happy when respected for what he says, does, and thinks. It's not enough to just work hard for hours like Saturn does. Work your fingers to the bone in quiet silence like, the beloved slave nature that Saturn can be, which is glorifying in its own way. But Saturn can be happy not saying anything, but building up something that it points to. Hey, everybody, check this out. And everyone goes, oh my God, you are so amazing for what your Saturn has done, is what we could say to a person in that instance. But the sun has a dignity on its shoulders that it wants to be respected for. It wants to experience the dignity of its energy, not just its accumulated accomplishments. Although the accumulated accomplishments eventually, if you abide by the energy, will be a part of you confidently expressing this energy when you get to be 50 years old, as we've said. Right? So the sun feels loved and happy when respected for what he says, does, and thinks. However, the sun feels particularly loved when his actions to take care of and provide for others are appreciated. And it's the actual action that he does, and then people see it and they say, oh my gosh, thank you for doing that thing. Thank you for being a part of the energy that you are, that has allowed you to be appreciated in this way. The sun feels happy when he fulfills his duty to lead, and when his lead provides for the betterment of that for which he is responsible. The sun feels most unhappy when he is unable to lead those he loves and cares for to a better future, and when he finds himself unable to fulfill his duties. So, we go through all the elements in a lot of these, in this book, and it relates to the Panchatattvas, the 5 elements. This book is the best authority I've found on the subject. But we're not going to go through it with the sun, because the sun doesn't necessarily consider itself to be in line with the tattvas in the way that the other tattvas, the other planets are. Now we can go through caste, and the castes are an interesting thing. The sun and Mars are considered to be of the Kshatriya caste. That's the warrior caste. They have an innate desire to lead, promote ideals, and protect their fellow men. The Kshatriya's goal is to act in accordance with Dharma, with some greater ideal. And there's a lot of beautiful things to be said there. That's why the sun is considered like a leader, a politician, and a promoter of ideals. Ernst gives such good words about this, and I recommend everybody to get the Graha Sutras for yourself in order to see all the stuff that I'm not talking about here, because there is still so much to look into. And I believe that if you want to read and get for yourself the Graha Sutras book from, you can go to the link in my description box below and get one for yourself. And I highly recommend it because, again, this is important guts of astrology. So check out the link in the description box below if you would be interested in at least seeing where you can find it. I just have an Amazon link on there. Now, one of the things we read is, yes, this is an Ernst Wilhelm book, Teresa. Yes, Ernst is really something. Now, we're reading next is a little bit on the gunas. Each planet abides by a guna nature. The guna is the activating quality that spurs one towards activity. And we know that there are 3 gunas. Sattva, the most pure, Rajas, the most active, and Tamas, which is the lethargic one. Sattva is what the sun abides by. We read that the sun, the moon, and Jupiter are the Sattvic planets. It literally means true essence and alludes to strength of character, wisdom, and goodness. Actions that are done with the motivation of strengthening one's character, the motivation of developing and dispersing wisdom and love, and those actions which are motivated by one's true nature or inspiration are sattva. And if you can read the nature of Jupiter, the moon, and the sun in what was just said. Actions performed out of sattva are those actions which are innate to the individual. And that's why they are this spiritual nature in a way. They will thus be always inspiring and fulfilling to the individual, come what may in their life. Now, we read that the sun is a noble graha that causes each person to be the best that they can be. The sun is the king or noble leader who is inspired to take care for those who he loves and thus disperses love the way a leader cares for his people. It's the Atman, and it can only motivate a person by the inspiration that comes from their true self. A person with a well-situated sun is able to follow their inspirations, while a person with a poorly situated sun doubts their qualities and is thus unable to follow their inspirations. So we read a little bit about Tamas, and then we read about Rajas. And really, there's lots to be said about all of these things. What we read is that if the sun is poorly situated in a chart, sattva becomes corrupted, and a person might have poor self-esteem, which results in their not having the courage to do the noble things that they're inspired to do. Feeling like a failure, no concentrated effort is made to better themselves or to provide for others. Instead, one gets attached to the moment's distraction, pretending it to be important so as to believe they have something worth doing, when in fact they are not doing what they are inspired to do. Thus, life has become motivated by Rajas and not by Sattva. Not following one's inspiration, life becomes toil to be escaped, and thus life is motivated by Tamas and not Sattva. When they're doing something just for the sake of it, they can be very Rajas there. I'm so glad to see that you came, Samantha. Thanks for hanging out with us, and thank you for everything that you do and hanging out with us here. I appreciate you, Samantha, and I appreciate everybody who's still hanging out here and enjoying this Sunday rock and roll with us. Now, to say this final point here, the sun, moon, and Jupiter are the important grahas for creating a good and solid character. If they're well suited in the horoscope, a person does no deeds that are ill, and all afflictions in the horoscope become as naught to them, as they will have confidence, proper regard for themselves, and proper understanding of themselves. If these grahas are poorly situated, a person feels empty, insecure, and lacking. These ill feelings are at the root of all unhappiness, producing behaviors from selfishness to addictions. And this, for me, is one of the great things that Ernst has to give in this book. It's one of the secret gems. You wouldn't know it until you've read the book. But I'm giving it to you here, is that the sun and moon and Jupiter, as the Sattvic planets, have the best key to unlocking the goodness that everybody needs inside themselves in order to live the happiest life that they could live. So always think about the nature of the sun and moon and Jupiter, and remember that as you carry on your knowledge and study of all things Sanskrit and Jyotish. Now, there is a great little part here that we're going to go through, and this is still part of the descriptions of the Grahas. Parashara, as well as most astrological texts, give character descriptions of the Grahas. These descriptions fill out the characters who are the Grahas and provide many of the physical and personality traits of these Grahas. So we read that the sun is of a pitta quality. Pitta is the energy of activity that fuels anything we actively do and pursue. The more pitta the person has, the more a person acts, does, caretakes, and provides, etc. And any of these doshas, even pitta dosha, etc., can become deranged or excessive, in which case they become a dosha. This is what a dosha is. It's an extreme. It's a fault. As long as pitta, kapha, and vata are harmonious, the mind and body remain strong and healthy. And of course, this is coming from Ayurveda. Ayurveda is a wonderful sister science to astrology in the Indian ideal of things. And for me, I've gotten into it, and it's been one of the greatest things that I could ever have gotten into for my personal health and wellness. Now, here in this part of the text, we read a little bit about the sun. What we read is, regarding the nature of the sun and those who are dominant in sun qualities. This is the quote we've already read from the beginning of our text, beginning of this video. Honey yellowed-eyed is the sun, square and radiantly pure, O twice born, of pitta nature, intelligent, masculine, but with little hair, O twice born. It's funny because I'm like this as a Leo. I've got like no hair on my chest at all. I hardly ever get like facial hair except for the little mustachy scruffs that I can get. And we read that Leo has little hair except for the little tufts that it has. They're square and stout, and not always that tall, more stout than anything. Now what we read is that the sun has honey yellow eyes, which is to say that he sees the sweetness around him. The ability to see the sweetness around him causes the sun to never harm anything more vulnerable or weaker than himself, and causes the sun to always help that which is in greater need. The sun is square in build. However, square also symbolizes stability and steadfastness. The sun thus provides for consistency in thought, and therefore action, and so provides steadfast, committable, and reliable behavior. The sun is the great purifier. It is Agni, the vital fire responsible for purifying the body of toxins and impurities. Psychologically, the sun is pure in mind and thinks of what it must do and what it is responsible for, instead of what it desires. It has a pitta or fiery temperament, and pitta makes the sun physically and materially active, and takes joy in the success that its actions bring. The intelligence of the sun is left-brained intelligence, the rational and pragmatic intelligence, and the intelligence of common sense. interestingly enough. But it makes sense that the sun would be the hard one, and then the moon would be the right-brained intelligence. Physically, the sun will be seen to give less hair or a balding appearance when in the rising sign or when it's with the rising sign lord. Hair is one part of our bodies that is out of our immediate control. It is blown by the wind, it falls in accordance with gravity, and cannot be moved by itself, but only with the help of another appendage. So this is something we have to consider, and Irene makes the point that I have a lot of hair. Even I'm a Leo, but I'm a Venus Atmakarika, and I actually have a weak sun in Shadbala. So I don't necessarily have a lot of this masculine quality that we read coming from the sun, at least not inherently in my astrology chart. So just because somebody is a Leo rising doesn't mean they're going to convey the energy of Leo. It really more depends on the strength of the sun and the abundance of sun energy inside the chart. So this is something that we do have to consider. But there are still qualities that a Leo rising can expect to have. So the hair is it's something we can't control. It's blown by the wind, falls in accordance with gravity, and it cannot be moved by itself, but only with the help of your hands or with another appendage. There's a metaphor here. Since the sun has little hair, he's not very interested in that which he has little control over, and really even in what he has. He likes to have what he does have, he likes to have under his dictate. Hair is also the one part of our bodies that does not have any sensory perceptions. So the sun is not very interested in that which he is not perceptive of. The sun just takes care of what it knows it's good at taking care of. So the sun person is not hung up or restricted by past events. Spiritually, hair represents the extraneous things that distract from spiritual realizations, and the record of our past misdeeds, none of which are much importance to the spiritually inspired sun. The past is my past, says the sun, all of whose is littered with acts of low nobility. Everything, however, will improve if you make a spiritual effort now. It's beautiful to hear the sun describe itself in the way that these sutras tend to have us read about. So ultimately, folks, there's still so much left in here that we could read about in the nature of all the planets and in the nature of the sun. Now, ultimately, I have one ideal thing I still want to look at. All the Grahas have sights. The sun and Mars are upward looking, just as they are of the Kshatriya caste. This shows that they are ambitious and always envisioning the great things they hope to do in the future. These planets appraise, the sun and Mars, appraise what they look at, and the measure they use is some respected principle. The sun looks up towards the responsibilities and duties that he is inspired to lead. The sun measures those he looks at against the principles of honor and esteem. This is very much in the nature of the sun as well. The sun is considered firm by Parashara. When the sun proceeds about his business, he's steady and committed. When he says no or draws the line, it is a firm refusal or boundary that cannot be crossed. And the sun makes all things firm. Furniture is influenced by the sun, for example, and they'll have firm furniture if they're a sun person, rather than soft plush furniture. Tends to be people who have strong bones too when they have a strong sun. Now there's one more in here that I really wanted to get at, and this has to do with the Naisargika dashas, and this has to do with the ages of the Grahas. Now this is probably going to be what I think is going to be the last venture in this text, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just check that I'm right on that. Yes. So this is our last little venture for today, everybody. I hope you guys have been enjoying this. There's so much to be said about the nature of each planet, and I really wanted this to just be a real podcast, just digging into the nature of specifically the sun. I think that it went a little longer than I anticipated, and the next time I do this, I'm going to probably whittle it down a little bit. And specifically focus on only certain sutras, the ones that, just so we don't have a repetitive motif, because ultimately the nature of this book is something that you can read a little bit of, just chew on it as an astrologer, slowly go through it, and even though a lot of things are repeated, you slowly over time absorb the consciousness behind the symbols. Remember I showed you the red draping the little square box? The nature of the box is the consciousness of the deva, of the deity, of the Graha. And the red drape is what we know of as the astrological figurations of each planet. So this book is something that is a good thing for everybody to digest in their own time. I've just wanted to give everybody a taste of it and a taste of how the sun relates to it. Now, this last chapter, we're talking about what's called Naisargika dasha. And it talks about life's natural periods. What we see is that Parashara tells us that each human being has certain life periods that are going to perennially live through. The moon's age is age 0 to 1. That is consuming milk. One should know that of Mars as the following of teeth arising, and that's basically 1 to 3. Mercury is the time of learning lessons up to the beginning of sexual agitation. So Mercury is 3 to 12. Venus is youth, which is known as that described previously with having sexual agitation. That's 12 to 32. Jupiter is spoken as that of the middle, it's age 32 to age 50. The sun runs from the half, and from the last great accomplishment is Saturn's unfortunate time. So the sun goes from 50 to 70, and then Saturn goes from 70 to 120. So this is an important aspect of astrology. I'm eventually going to be discussing this as a video in itself, because it's very important. And you have to understand that depending on the strength of each planet in your chart, you're going to have a proclivity for enjoyment in each of these periods. If you have a good moon, it's very important because you will have a little bit of luck and divine benevolence with regards to what programming you're given from age 0 to 1, which is the most vulnerable stage of human life. If you have a strong Mars, then while you're developing your muscles, you're developing your terrestrial instincts from 1 to 3. You're teething. It's the terrible twos. I want that chocolate bar. No, you can't have that chocolate bar, but I want it. That kind of being able to deal with territory in this way and not having traumatic effects from it is going to be shown by your Mars. If you have a strong Mars, you can be told, no, you can't have that chocolate bar. You'll say, but I want it. And the parent will say, you can get a chocolate bar in your own at some point, but we can't have one right now. And then you'll fume a little bit, but then you'll accept that you can't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need. And somewhere along the line, you'll ask your parent, I would like to have that chocolate bar still. And the parent will go, okay, if you do want it, all right, well, if you be good, then I'll get you the chocolate bar. Mars says, okay. And Mars tries to be good and does its best. And if you have a good Mars, you'll have a parent who understands the importance of you developing on what you say you want and having it being manifested. So your parent will say, you know what, you've been good. Here's that chocolate bar. And you didn't take it personally. You didn't take it bad when your parents said you couldn't have it at first. You worked hard on getting what you wanted over time. So you won't have any bad traumas at the age where you're developing on the Mars instinct from 1 to 3. Same thing with Mercury. If you have a good, strong Mercury, then you're going to be well suited in the lessons that you learn from age 3 to age 12, which is learning about knowledge and words and really schooling before puberty sets in. And puberty makes everything whack when you hit the age of Venus. Venus is the age when you get married, from 12 to 32, typically for a lot of people. And it's the age when you learn about love and what love and your personal closeness with your partner means to you as you go further into your life. If you, Jupiter is its own thing from 32 to 50. If you have a strong Jupiter, then you might have, usually Jupiter's an arbiter of kids. A lot of people have kids from 32 to 50. They raise them up to the point that they're 50 years old, and then once the kids are off to college and they go and live their life, then you're 50 years old, and then you can do what you wanted to do with your life. And that is the sun period from age 50 to age 70. It's considered to be the most prominent chapter of what the sun has been building on in terms of what your soul's destiny is supposed to be on this planet. If you have a good sun, then everything will have led up to this point when you can display what you've wanted to do in the most matured way possible. Oh, hi, mister. You gonna come say hi? I thought you might. Hello, sir. This is my cat, everybody. I think he has decided to come and say hello to us. Want to be a little monster for a little while? Oh, he's adorable, but he's very mischievously... Oh, you're so in the way. Come on, sir. You gotta get out. That's right, buddy. Yep. That's Wally, everybody. So... the sun period is very important for all of us. It's really a condensation of what your whole life has meant up to this point. So Ernst tells us, life has its natural periods during which specific developments occur. Each of these periods is ruled by one of the Grahas. There are different views in regards to just which age each Graha rules. Amongst Sanskrit texts, the oldest available text that actually describes the ages of the Grahas is Spujidvaja's Yavana Jataka, the sutras of which have been given above. And that's this whole thing. The moon's age is that of consuming milk. Mars is that of having teeth arising, etc. Now, the descriptions given by Yavana Jataka correlate with the specific ages given in Brihat Parasha or Horoshastra. And this is called the Naisargika. It's also Naisargika, similar sort of thing there. I've heard it said in different ways. Yeah, Naisargika, the natural dasha. So I'm going to do a video on this eventually, and we will get into it in a bit more detail. But for this video, we're going to run through what is it the sun, middle age, 50 to 70, all about. How does it relate to what we can expect from what the sun is? The sun rules the beginning of the second half of life, the middle-aged period during which a person realizes their true greatness and the success of their abilities. This period follows the primary child-rearing years, and so it's a period of greater personal freedom. If the sun is well situated in the horoscope, this will be a period during which the person finds that what they have done supports who they are, and that they can do what they do with honesty and integrity. What they do is, in fact, nothing more than the duty which is born of their innate nature. Alternately, if their earlier years were very difficult or confined, if you have a good sun, this may be the period during which the individual will pursue their inspirations with great vigor and very rapidly find success with them. In either case, this can be a period of true prestige during which one's actions speak for themselves. If the sun is poorly situated in the horoscope, this will be a period during which the individual finds their life lacking. Though they may have the time to do great things, they have not lived a healthy life of individuality that would have prepared them to do their best with those things which they have been inspired towards. Instead, they can only squander their time with trivialities such as gambling, drinking, etc., things that are not important to the soul. We notice that noticeable changes occur at the beginning of each age. At the beginning of the sun's age, the individual will come to realize that their life has prepared them for a greater task than they have as yet performed, or that they have squandered many of their talents and abilities, but now in the age of the sun, they now have the chance and freedom to develop the parts of themselves that they are most inspired towards. We even notice that the middle of each of these ages is the high point of the age. And we read that at the age of 60, which is between 50 and 70, at 60, the middle of the sun's age, a person will often reach the heights of their inspirations. This is a crucial year during which an individual will proceed to do the greatest things yet. Or if the sun is afflicted, then they'll just simply begin to retreat from their activities. Now, Ernst tells us that the most effective tool for evaluating the Grahas in their ages is Shad Bala. Each of the 6 individual balas that form Shad Bala has something important to say about a planet. If any of the planet's individual balas in Shad Bala is weak, then the individual will experience difficulty in respect to the weak bala. Shad Bala is a vast subject, an extensive book of which is in the works. Can't wait to check that out. So the influence of other grahas will also have a say on the well-being, or otherwise, of a particular age. For example, if you have Krura grahas in the 4th or the 6th or the 8th from a graha that rules a certain age, or if you have cruel planets joining that graha, or you have cruel planets aspecting the graha, or they're being hemmed in, which is another astrological technique, then that graha will all of these factors will make the age more difficult and unpleasant. Simple example is if Saturn is conjunct the sun, then some illness, some limitation in your life has caused you to never feel like you could fully do what you want to do with your inspirations. And by the time you get to age 50, Saturn will have dwindled some part of your inspiration so that you are blocked in fully experiencing your age 50 to 70 period to the fullest that you would want to. Gentle planets in the 4th, 6th, or 8th from a graha, or being conjunct them, they will make the age happy, enjoyable, easy, and pleasant. Now, we also read that if the lord of an age is, so if you've got the sun in the 6th house, the 8th house, or the 12th house, there will be difficulties towards having the best age. It can still be enjoyable if its Shadbala is favorable and if it has some strong influences from a gentle planet. If the Lord of an age is in an angle or trine, there will be consistency and a smooth start towards having a great age, as long as that Graha's Shadbalas are favorable and the Graha is not excessively afflicted by Krura Grahas. So there's really a lot there. You know, ultimately, if you've got the sun in a trine or an angle, you're going to have a little bit of an easier time getting a proper start on the age of the sun and with all things related to the sun. Because really these ages at age 50, you know, why would you have the strength and inspiration to do well when you're 50? It's because the sun will have been strong throughout your whole existence. You have to understand that the pinpoints in time permeate beyond throughout your whole incarnation. You can't expect to have an easy life with regards to what the sun symbolizes as we've described it in the sutras throughout this whole video. If you don't have the qualities of sacrifice and self-surrender and soul enmeshment and soul respect and soul surrender, you can't expect at the end of things to get to 50 and magically say, you know what, I think I've got everything I need to do the sun thing. It permeates, the ages permeate through every age. And so we have to understand this nature of the Grahas as well. So, because we are always building and embodying the planets and the Grahas that we are living with and through in our experience on planet Earth. So, there is a lot to be said about all of these things. Teresa's noted that the heart problem in Elvis's family, Lisa Marie, died at 54 and is the result of his grandparents being first cousins. That's interesting. Be interesting to see if there's some correlation to the sun in there, as you've said, Teresa. And Susie has noted that something like everything we've read here is good guidance for younger folks to build foundations for happiness and health that will carry on into the sun's sign age. You know, really the divinity of astrology shows all the archetypes necessary for human wholeness and development. And this is one of the reasons why astrology is such an important thing to talk about with young people and with human growth in general. Ernst Wilhelm has such a good way of carrying us through the aspects of knowledge that are eternally going to be useful to everybody. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to read this book. Again, check out the link below if you've been interested in this. If you want to get all the goodies for yourself, to read it as an astrologer, to read it in a slow, patient way, even for Western astrologers. Everybody will get a lot, in my opinion, out of getting an understanding of the nature of the planets through these unconscious symbolic archetypes that are given by the Vedic rishis of the past. Ernst Wilhelm concludes by saying that the Grahas give us much to think about, for they're part of our every experience. Life is full and varied, and thus there is much to learn about the Grahas. Never in any one book, or even in a library of books, could be given every indication of the Grahas. The rishis, however, wisely gave us sutras that would convey the ideas of the Grahas, so that we can apply them to all things that we may never venture to examine in the horoscope. The nature of these sutras give us aspects of things that you couldn't see just by studying and practicing astrology. You have to study the sutras of the Vedas, which have a deeper heart than astronomical horoscope study. And Graha Sutras are just the beginning of astrological study. Certainly the most interesting and wide in their ramifications, which Ernst has attempted to demonstrate through his commentary on the sutras. There's much more to learn before reading charts from here. So continue learning about the signs, the houses, the nakshatras, the vargas, and predictive techniques, and you'll be able to use your knowledge of the grahas to be a very effective astrologer. Throughout the text, Ernst hinted at ways to use these sutras, such as determining the complexion of an individual, the sex of their children, the nature of their residential environment, in order to actually predict the appropriate predictive techniques. In order to predict such things, the proper predictive techniques must be used. And this is beyond the scope of this text. So, Ernst is basically saying here that, there's a real science to predictive astrology that many people it'll be cool for people to check out at some point in the history of astrology as we know it. But before doing any predictive astrology, before doing horoscope analysis, it's good to know your Graha Sutras, as well as the remaining fundamentals. Perhaps the most rewarding aspect in studying and contemplating the Grahas is realizing their presence all around us and in everything that we do. Remember, the Grahas are a manifestation of Vishnu. Therefore, those things they manifest around us and through us are also aspects of Vishnu. So astrology reminds us of the one eternal truth. I wish you well in realizing this truth as you pursue your study of astrology. And Ernst tells us at the very end, if you've enjoyed this book, I'm sure you will want to know more. And he says he's always years behind what his readers want. He can only write so many books so fast. But he has many courses available on audio or video or even live, which will get you by until the next book that you seek. These courses, along with some free classes and articles, are available through Ernst's website at www.vedic-astrology.net. That's our guy, Ernst Wilhelm. What a beauty. I wanted to just give that last little piece at the end just to show Ernst Wilhelm. I have such a respect for him, and he is really a gemstone in the world of astrology. So I'm glad I got to go through the nature of the sun. There's a lot here. As I said, the next time we go through this, I'm probably going to whittle it down a bit, but I think it's appropriate that this was such a nice, long, podcasty session in order to learn more about the nature of what the sun is all about. So, thanks to everybody for coming along and hanging out for the ride. Teresa, Mia Moore, Irene Mack, Susie Underwood. We had a few people earlier on as well, including Samantha Sylvester. We had Porter. I'm trying to remember your last part of your name here, Porter. We had lots of people, Shravana, Kelsor Pine Tree, and we had a few people giving me tips today. That was Teresa, Irene Mack, and I believe Samantha Sylvester. And I appreciate so much from all of you for just hanging out with me and delving into the consciousness of Vedic Sutras. For me, that's just something that I just love to do in general. And to share it with people is a blessed feeling and a blessed experience. I'm glad to be doing that with all of you guys. Really nice to be able to do that with you all. This is what I like to do on my channel. Eventually, I'm going to be taking this beyond astrology and moving towards just general Vedic consciousness in the various sorts of ways that it's available out in the world. But I love talking astrology, and I'm going to chip away at this for a long time, basically till I get most of the stuff, the rising signs. Probably I'll go through all the planets in this sort of way. I want to do Jupiter in the signs as well, and as well as some of general astrological writings of mine. Stay tuned next week. We're going to talk about the sidereal tropical debate, and as well, pretty soon I'm going to be doing a philosophical take on the Western model of the cosmos versus the Eastern model of the cosmos. So I love talking about all this stuff, folks, and I love doing it with you guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next Sunday, and anytime in between if I pop in and do anything else in between. Take care, folks, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Sunday.